My name is Sarah Jenkins. I am 32 years old and I work as a freelance book editor. I spend my days fixing the plot holes in other people's stories, but I never realized the story I was living in was a lie. An old woman knocked on my door and said I have cancer and I do not have much time left. My daughter and your husband have had an 8-year affair and have 2 children together. After that, what she told me left me speechless. Before I continue this story, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit like and subscribe if you have ever had to stand up to a liar who underestimated your worth. It was 10 o'clock on a Tuesday morning, and the silence in my house felt like a luxury. We lived in a gated community in Connecticut, the kind of place where the lawns are manicured to within an inch of their lives, and the neighbors smile politely but never ask deep questions. I was in the kitchen brewing a second pot of coffee. The aroma of roasted beans filled the air, masking the lingering scent of my husband's cologne. David had just left 10 minutes ago. I could still picture him standing in the foyer, checking his reflection in the antique mirror, adjusting his silk tie. He looked handsome, successful, and utterly trustworthy. He told me he was driving into the city to meet a VIP client for a real estate walkthrough. He kissed me on the forehead, a dry, perfunctory peck that felt more like a habit than a gesture of affection, and said, "Do not wait up for me, Sarah. This deal is going to run late." I watched his Audi pull out of the driveway and felt a wave of relief. I told myself it was because I needed to focus on the manuscript I was editing, but deep down, I think I just preferred the solitude to the loneliness I felt when he was in the room. I sat down at the dining table with my red pen ready to work. The house was perfectly still. Then the knocking started. It was not a polite tap. It was a frantic, heavy pounding that shook the heavy oak frame of the front door. I frowned and checked my watch. I was not expecting a delivery, and security usually called up before letting anyone through the gate. The pounding continued, relentless and desperate. I walked to the door, heart rate climbing slightly, and looked through the peephole. Standing on my porch was a woman I had never seen before. She looked like a ghost that had not quite crossed over yet. She was old, perhaps in her 60s, but sickness had aged her another 20 years. She wore a thick wool coat, despite the warm spring air, and a knit beanie was pulled low over her head. Under the brim, I could see she had no eyebrows and no eyelashes. Her skin was a translucent gray stretched tight over her cheekbones. She was swaying slightly on her feet, as if standing up required every ounce of her remaining strength. I unlocked the deadbolt, but kept the security chain on, opening the door just a crack. "Can I help you?" I asked. The woman looked up. Her eyes were sunken and yellowed, but they burned with a terrifying intensity. She did not waste time with greetings. "Are you Sarah Jenkins?" she wheezed. Her voice sounded like dry leaves scraping together. "Yes," I said, keeping my hand on the door. "Who are you?" "Open the door, Sarah," she said. "I drove 2 hours from Jersey and I am running on fumes. My name is Doris Sullivan. I have stage 4 pancreatic cancer. The doctors gave me 3 weeks at best. I am not here for your money. I am here because I refuse to die with this weight on my soul." I hesitated. There was something about the finality in her tone that froze me. She did not look dangerous. She looked broken. I slid the chain off and opened the door. Doris stepped into my foyer, bringing with her the smell of stale hospital air and old medicine. She leaned heavily against the wall, catching her breath. I offered her a chair, but she shook her head. "We do not have time for hospitality," she said. "You need to listen, and you need to listen closely, because I am betraying my own flesh and blood to save you." I folded my arms, trying to maintain a facade of control in my own home. "What are you talking about?" Doris looked me dead in the eye. "My daughter Amber is your husband's lover. They have been together for 8 years. The words hung in the air between us, absurd and impossible. I let out a short, nervous laugh. "You are confused," I said. "My husband is David Jenkins. We have been married for 10 years. He is a workaholic. He barely has time to eat dinner with me, let alone maintain a second life. You have the wrong house and the wrong man." Doris did not argue. She did not scream. She simply reached into her oversized tote bag with trembling hands. 8 years, Sarah," she repeated softly. "Since before you bought this house, since before you started your little editing business. While you were sitting here waiting for him, he was in my living room eating my cooking. She pulled out a large, glossy photograph and thrust it toward me. I took it, my fingers numb. The world tilted on its axis. The photo was high-quality, crystal clear. It showed a backyard party. There were balloons and streamers. In the center of the frame sat David. My David. He was wearing the blue polo shirt I had bought him for his 35th birthday, the one he said he lost at the dry cleaners. He was sitting in a lawn chair, head thrown back, laughing a genuine, unguarded laugh I had not seen in a decade. On his lap sat two children, a boy and a girl. They had curly, dark hair and dimples that mirrored his exactly. Behind them hung a colorful banner that read, "Happy 7th birthday, Leo and Mia." I stared at the image, my brain refusing to process the visual data. The date stamp in the corner was from 2 weeks ago. 2 weeks ago, David told me he was at a conference in Boston. "They are twins," Doris said, her voice cutting through the ringing in my ears. "Leo and Mia. They are 7 years old. He is their father, Sarah. He pays for their private school tuition on the Upper East Side. He pays for Amber's luxury apartment. He bought her a yoga studio last year. He tells you the market is tough and funds are tight, but he is pouring millions into his other family." I felt bile rise in my throat. I stumbled back, clutching the edge of the console table for support. The photo crumpled in my hand. 7 years, I whispered. The betrayal was not a sharp knife. It was a blunt object bludgeoning me over and over. Every late night at the office, every business trip, every missing dollar from our joint account suddenly fell into place like the pieces of a grotesque puzzle. But why? I choked out, tears stinging my eyes. Why are you telling me this now? If you knew for 8 years, why now? Doris took a step closer. She reached out and grabbed my wrist. Her grip was surprisingly strong. Bony fingers digging into my flesh. "Because of what I heard last week," she hissed. I looked at her through my blurred vision. "I was in the guest room pretending to sleep," she continued. "David and Amber were in the kitchen. They were arguing. Amber is tired of waiting, Sarah. She is tired of being the secret. She wants to be the wife. She wants this house. She wants your life. Let her have him." I spat, throwing the photo onto the floor. "If he is this garbage, she can have him. I will divorce him today." "No." Doris squeezed my wrist tighter, shaking me. "You do not understand. David said he cannot divorce you. He said the prenup is too tight and your family trust is protected. If he leaves you, he leaves with nothing. He told Amber there is only one way they can be together with all the money." A cold chill that had nothing to do with the air conditioning swept down my spine. The hair on my arms stood up. "What are you saying?" I whispered. Doris reached into her bag again. This time she pulled out a small orange prescription bottle. It was unlabeled. "He is not planning to leave you, Sarah," she said, her voice dropping to a terrified whisper. "He is planning to bury you. This is the vitamin bottle from your nightstand, the one you take every morning. I swapped it out of Amber's purse yesterday." I stared at the bottle. It looked exactly like my daily multivitamins. "He has been replacing your pills," Doris said, tears finally spilling down her hollow cheeks. "Warfarin, high-dose blood thinners. He grinds them up and represses them. He wants you to have a stroke, Sarah. A natural cause, no autopsy required. Just a tragic sudden death so the grieving widower can inherit everything." I stopped breathing. The room spun. The man who kissed me goodbye 10 minutes ago, the man who shared my bed. He wasn't just a cheater. He was a monster. Doris pressed the bottle into my trembling hand. "I am dying, Sarah," she said. "I have made my peace with God, but I will not let my daughter and that man get away with murder. You have to be smart. You cannot just confront him. He will deny it, and he will find another way. You have to destroy him." I looked from the deadly bottle in my hand to the photo of the twins on the floor. The shock began to recede, replaced by a cold, hard rage that started in my gut and spread to my fingertips. I wiped the tears from my face. "Tell me everything," I said, my voice steady and unrecognizable even to myself. "Tell me everything." I stepped back and gestured for Doris to enter the living room. My legs felt heavy as if I were wading through concrete. She walked past me, her movements slow and pained, the scent of antiseptic trailing behind her. She sat on the edge of my pristine, cream-colored sofa, not daring to lean back as if she knew her presence was a stain on my perfect life. I remained standing, arms crossed tight over my chest, trying to hold myself together physically because emotionally I was already shattering. "You said you have proof," I said, my voice flat. Doris nodded. She reached into her oversized bag again and pulled out an iPad. It was an older model, thick and battered with a cracked screen protector. It looked like something a child had discarded. "This belongs to Amber," she said. "She got a new one last week and tossed this in the donation pile. She thought she had wiped it. She is not very tech-savvy." I retrieved it. I guessed the passcode. She held the device out to me. I hesitated for a fraction of a second, terrified of what I would see. Then I took it. The cold metal casing felt heavy in my hand. "What is the passcode?" I asked. Doris looked at me with pity in her eyes. "It is 0615, she said. My stomach dropped. June 15th. That was not Amber's birthday. It was not the twins' birthday. It was our wedding anniversary. The fact that his mistress used our anniversary as a passcode felt like a deliberate, perverse joke. I punched in the numbers, and the screen unlocked. I opened the photo gallery first. There were thousands of images. My thumb hovered over the screen, trembling. I scrolled up to the most recent album labeled Family Vacations. I tapped it, and the first image that filled the screen made my knees buckle. I had to sit down on the armrest of the chair opposite Doris. The photo showed David standing on a white sandy beach wearing swim trunks I recognized. He had his arm around Amber, who was wearing a white bikini and a sun hat. They were holding cocktails. The geotag at the top said Maui, Hawaii. The date was from 3 months ago. 3 months ago, David had told me he was going to a real estate conference in Seattle. He had complained about the rain. He had called me every night whispering about how boring the seminars were and how much he missed me. I had felt guilty for enjoying my time alone while he was suffering for his career. But looking at this photo, I saw the truth. He was not suffering. He was in paradise. I swiped left. Paris. David and Amber kissing under the Eiffel Tower. That was the week he said he was in London for a merger. I swiped again. Aspen. A ski trip. David was teaching a small boy how to ski. The boy looked exactly like David did in his childhood photos. The joy on my husband's face was radiant, a look of pure, fatherly pride I had never seen directed at me. We had tried to have children for 3 years before he told me he did not want them anymore, that we should focus on our careers. I believed him. I thought we were on the same page. But here he was playing the perfect father to a son I did not know existed. I scrolled faster now, the images blurring into a kaleidoscope of betrayal. Birthday parties, Christmas mornings, Thanksgiving dinners. While I sat alone in this big, empty house, waiting for him to come home from his urgent business meetings, he was carving turkeys and opening presents with another family. He had not just cheated on me. He had built an entire parallel universe where I did not exist. "Check the messages," Doris said softly from the sofa. "Read what they say about you." I switched to the messaging app. The thread between them was named Hubby and Wifey. Nausea rolled over me. I scrolled back to a random date last month. "David, I can't wait to be home with you, baby. She is cooking salmon again. You know I hate salmon. It smells like her desperation. Amber, just eat it and smile. We need her to sign off on the renovation budget for the rental property. Be nice. David, I am always nice. I am the actor of the year. I will bring you leftover wine. She bought a vintage bottle, and she won't even know if I swap it out." I lowered the iPad, feeling like I couldn't breathe. They were laughing at me. They were mocking my cooking, my attempts to make him happy, my trust. I was not just a wife to them. I was a resource, a bank account with a pulse. "There is more," Doris said. "Look at the folder marked The Project." I found the folder. I expected to see blueprints or business plans. David was always talking about his investment projects. 2 years ago, he had come to me with a proposal. He said he found a distressed property in a historic district, a fixer-upper that could be a gold mine. He needed $300,000 for the down payment and renovations. He said it was a high-risk, high-reward venture, and he wanted to put it in a separate LLC to protect my assets. I trusted him. I wrote the check from my inheritance without blinking. I opened the folder. The first photo was of a house, but it was not a distressed property. It was a charming Victorian home with a wraparound porch and a manicured lawn. I recognized the address. It was in one of the most expensive school districts in the state. I scrolled through the interior shots. A state-of-the-art kitchen with marble countertops, a master bedroom with a canopy bed, a playroom filled with expensive toys. Then I saw the caption under one of the photos written by Amber. Finally got the dream house. Thank you, Daddy, for making it happen. The kids are going to love the pool. I gasped. The investment property. The project I had funded. It was not an investment. I had bought a house for his mistress. I paid for the roof over their heads. I paid for the bed they slept in. Every time David told me the contractors were delayed or the material costs had gone up, he was just funneling more of my money into their nest. That house, Doris said, her voice trembling with anger, is 10 minutes from here. When he says he is going to the gym, he goes there. When he says he is going to the store, he goes there. You paid for every brick, Sarah. My hands were shaking so hard I nearly dropped the device. I felt a cold sweat breaking out on my forehead. The level of deception was so calculated, so precise. It wasn't a mistake. It was a financial strategy. But that is not the worst part, Doris said. Check the financial documents folder. She saves screenshots of everything. She likes to keep score. I tapped the folder. Inside were PDFs and screenshots of bank transfers and credit card statements. I saw a screenshot of a credit card statement. It was a card I recognized. It was my secondary American Express, the one I gave David for emergency client expenses. He told me he only used it for high-end dinners with potential buyers or booking conference rooms. I paid the bill every month via autopay. I rarely checked the line items because the total was always within the range he explained as necessary for doing business in luxury real estate. I zoomed in on the image. The statement showed a recurring monthly charge of $3,500. The merchant name was simply listed as SJA Education Services. I had seen that on the bills before. David told me SJA stood for Strategic Job Analysis, a consulting firm he used for market research. I had believed him. Why would I doubt my husband? But in the screenshot, Amber had circled the charge and written a note over it in bright pink digital ink. Tuition paid. St. Jude's Academy is worth every penny. Leo is going to be top of his class. I froze. St. Jude's Academy. It was the most exclusive private school in the state, the kind of place where senators and celebrities sent their children. I frantically opened the browser on the iPad and searched for St. Jude's Academy. The tuition page loaded. Annual tuition for one student was $42,000. I did the math in my head. 2 children, $84,000 a year. David was not spending my money on market research. He was paying for his illegitimate children's education with my credit card. I looked further down the statement. Tiny Toes Ballet, $500. David told me that was a client dinner at a French bistro. Karate Kids Dojo, $300. David told me that was a subscription to a real estate data service. Disneyland Resort Package, $6,000. David told me that was a deposit for a venue rental for a company gala. I put the iPad down on the coffee table. I felt stripped bare. Every aspect of my life was a lie. My husband was not a successful real estate agent. He was a parasite. He was living a millionaire lifestyle on a teacher's salary, and I was the one footing the bill. I was the one working late nights editing terrible manuscripts to keep our savings healthy while he was draining us dry to play house with another woman. He calls you the investor, Doris said, breaking the silence. That is his nickname for you when he talks to Amber. He tells her, do not worry, the investor will cover it. The investor. Something inside me snapped. It was a quiet snap, like a dry twig breaking in a winter forest. The sadness evaporated instantly, replaced by a cold clarity that felt like ice water in my veins. I looked at the photos of the twins again. They were innocent. They did not know their father was a thief. But David knew, and Amber knew. I stood up. The dizziness was gone. He thinks I am just a checkbook, I said, my voice steady and low. Doris looked up at me, a flicker of hope in her tired eyes. "He thinks you are a fool," she corrected. I walked over to the window and looked out at the driveway where David had parked his car just an hour ago. I looked at the manicured lawn he claimed he paid for, but I knew now I paid for that too. I turned back to Doris. "Thank you for showing me this," I said. I picked up the iPad again. I did not cry. I did not scream. I felt a strange sense of calm, the calm of a soldier who finally sees the enemy clearly on the battlefield. "You said you have 3 weeks," I asked her. Doris nodded. "Maybe less." "That is enough time," I said. I looked at the screen one last time at the photo of David, smiling that winning smile, the smile that had charmed me 10 years ago. "He wants the money," I said to the empty room. "He wants the house. He wants the life I built." I looked at Doris, and for the first time that morning, I smiled. It was not a nice smile. He is going to wish he had just asked for a divorce. I sat there on the edge of the coffee table, staring at the evidence of an 8-year betrayal. My heart was pounding against my ribs, but my mind was strangely clear. I had the photos. I had the bank statements. I had the proof that my husband was living a double life. But there was one piece of the puzzle that did not fit. I looked up at Doris. She was slumped on my sofa, looking more like a pile of old clothes than a human being. Her breathing was shallow and rattled in her chest. "You are her mother," I said, my voice breaking the silence of the room. "You just handed me the ammunition to destroy your own daughter's life. You gave me the proof that will take away her home, her lifestyle, and probably send the father of her children to jail." I paused, searching her face for an answer. Why, I asked. Why would a mother do this? If you know about the affair for 8 years, why didn't you just tell her to stop? Why come to me now? Doris closed her eyes. A tear leaked out and tracked through the deep lines of her face. She looked exhausted, not just from the cancer, but from the weight of the secret she was carrying. "Because she is not just a mistress anymore, Sarah," she whispered. I frowned. What does that mean? Doris opened her eyes, and they were filled with a terror that made my blood run cold. She sat up with difficulty, her hands gripping her knees. "Last week," she said. "Tuesday night. David was over at the house. The twins were asleep upstairs. I was in the guest room down the hall. They thought I was asleep. The chemotherapy knocks me out usually, but that night I was in pain. I was awake. I heard them in the kitchen." She stopped and took a ragged breath. "They were arguing." Doris continued. "Amber was crying. She told David she could not do it anymore. She said she was tired of sharing him. She said she wanted to be the wife. She wanted to walk down the street with him without looking over her shoulder. She told him to divorce you." I let out a bitter laugh. "Well, at least she has some standards," I said. "So what did David say? Did he tell her he loves me?" Doris shook her head slowly. The look on her face silenced me immediately. "No," she said. "He told her he hates you. He told her living with you is like living in a prison. He said he looks at you and sees nothing but a barrier between him and the life he wants." The words stung, but I pushed the pain away. I needed to hear the rest. "So why doesn't he leave?" I asked. "If he hates me so much, why is he still here?" "Because of the money," Doris said flatly. "He told Amber about the prenup. He said your father made sure everything was ironclad. If David files for divorce, he walks away with nothing. No alimony, no house, no access to the trust fund. He told her if he leaves you now, he will be bankrupt within a month, and he cannot support her or the twins." I nodded. My father was a smart man. He never trusted David. "So he is staying for the money," I said. "I already guessed that." "That is not a reason for you to come here." Doris leaned forward. Her voice dropped to a barely audible whisper. "He is not staying, Sarah. He is planning to leave, but he is not planning to divorce you." The room suddenly felt very small and very cold. I stared at the old woman, trying to understand what she was saying, but my brain refused to make the connection. "What do you mean?" I asked. Doris reached into her coat pocket again. Her hand was shaking so badly she struggled to pull the object out. Finally, she produced a small orange prescription bottle. It was identical to the one she had shown me earlier, but this one was full. "He told Amber there is a clause in the life insurance policy," she said. "He doubled your coverage last year, didn't he?" I froze. Yes, David had insisted on it. He said with the market being volatile, we needed to be responsible. He raised my policy to $5 million. He said it was to protect the estate taxes if anything happened to me. $5 million, Doris repeated. And if you die while you are still married, he gets everything. The insurance, the trust fund, the house, everything. I felt the blood drain from my face. My hands went numb. Die, I whispered. Doris placed the bottle on the table between us. It made a hollow plastic sound that echoed like a gunshot. He told Amber he has been working on it for 3 months, she said. He has been grinding up warfarin. It is a blood thinner, a very strong one. He mixes it into the powder inside your vitamin capsules. He does a few pills at a time so you do not notice. I stared at the bottle. I took those vitamins every single morning. David always brought them to me with a glass of water. He was so attentive, so caring. Here, honey, take your supplements. You have been looking pale lately, he would say. He wants you to have a stroke, Doris said, tears streaming down her face now. Or an internal hemorrhage. He told Amber it has to look natural. He said you are stressed, you work too much, you have a history of migraines. If you suddenly collapse and die of a brain bleed, no one will ask questions. The grieving husband will cry at the funeral, and then he will collect the check and move Amber into this house before the dirt is fresh on your grave. I could not breathe. My chest felt like it was being crushed by a giant stone. I flashed back to the last few months. The mysterious bruises on my legs that I couldn't explain. The nosebleed I had in the shower last week, that wouldn't stop for 20 minutes. The constant fatigue that I blamed on my workload. I wasn't working too hard. I was being poisoned. The man I slept next to. The man I had breakfast with. The man who kissed me goodbye this morning. He wasn't just cheating on me. He was actively, slowly, and methodically killing me. I looked at the bottle on the table. It wasn't medicine. It was a weapon. Why I managed to choke out. Why are you telling me? Amber is your daughter. If I die, she gets everything she wants. Doris sobbed, her body shaking. Because I am a mother, she cried. I raised Amber to be better than this. When I heard them planning it, when I heard her agree to it, when I heard her ask him how long it would take for you to die, I realized I had lost her. My daughter is gone. The woman in that kitchen was a monster. I am dying, Sarah. I have maybe 2 weeks left. I cannot meet my maker knowing I let an innocent woman be murdered. I cannot let my grandchildren be raised by 2 killers. She pushed the bottle toward me. Take it, she said. This is the bottle I took from her purse. It is the batch he prepared for next week. Test it. It is full of rat poison. I reached out and took the bottle. It felt heavy in my hand, hot and terrifying. I looked at the label. It was my name, my doctor, my pharmacy. Everything looked normal, but inside was death. I looked at Doris. The anger I felt earlier was gone, replaced by a horror so deep it numbed my soul. He is trying to kill me, I said, the words tasting like ash in my mouth. Doris nodded slowly. He is not just trying, Sarah, he is succeeding. Look at yourself. You are pale, you are thin, you are bruising. It is working. I stood up. My legs were shaking, but I forced them to hold my weight. I walked to the mirror in the hallway. I looked at my reflection, really looked at it, the dark circles under my eyes, the pallor of my skin. I pulled up the sleeve of my sweater. There were 3 large purple bruises on my forearm. I had thought I bumped into the desk. I turned back to Doris. Thank you, I said. My voice was different now. It was not the voice of a victim. It was the voice of a survivor. You saved my life, I said. Doris lowered her head. I just hope I am not too late, she whispered. I gripped the bottle tight. My knuckles turned white. You are not too late, I said. He wanted a funeral. He is going to get one, but it won't be mine. I walked over to the kitchen island where my phone lay. I picked it up. My hand was steady now. The fear had evaporated, burned away by the heat of my rage. I did not call the police. Not yet. The police would arrest him, but they wouldn't hurt him. They wouldn't make him feel the humiliation he had planned for me. They wouldn't take away the one thing he loved more than Amber, his reputation. I looked at Doris. Can you stand up? I asked. She nodded, wiping her face. Good, I said. We have work to do. You are not going to die in vain, Doris. We are going to make sure that when you go, you leave behind a world where justice has been served." I looked at the bottle of poison one last time before slipping it into my pocket. David wanted to play a game with my life. He wanted to gamble with death. He forgot that I am the one who holds the cards. And I was about to fold his entire hand. I watched Doris drive away in her battered sedan until the taillights disappeared around the curve of the cul-de-sac. The house was silent again, but the silence felt different now. It was no longer peaceful. It felt heavy and suffocating like the air before a thunderstorm. I looked down at the orange prescription bottle in my hand. It looked so innocent. Just a plastic container with a child-proof cap. But inside was the weapon my husband intended to use to end my life. I did not cry. I did not scream. A cold numbness had settled over me, shielding me from the horror of the reality. I walked to the garage and got into my car. I needed confirmation. Doris seemed truthful, but I could not base a murder accusation on the word of a dying woman I had just met. I needed science. I needed facts. I drove to a private diagnostic laboratory 3 towns over. I did not want to go to our family doctor or the local hospital where David knew everyone. I paid extra for an expedited toxicology screening. The technician, a young woman with kind eyes, asked if I wanted to consult a doctor about my medication. I told her I just wanted to check the purity of a supplement I bought online. It was a lie, but I was getting used to lying. The hour I spent waiting in the sterile lobby was the longest hour of my life. I stared at a poster on the wall about heart health and wondered if David had planned my funeral yet. Did he pick out the flowers? Did he write a eulogy about how tragic it was to lose his beloved wife so young? The thought made my stomach churn. Finally, the technician called my name. She handed me a sealed envelope. I walked out to the parking lot before opening it. My hands were trembling as I tore the paper. Positive. The word jumped out at me. The contents of the capsules tested positive for warfarin, a potent anticoagulant. The concentration was high enough that consistent ingestion over a few weeks would cause massive internal bleeding or a hemorrhagic stroke. I leaned back against the car seat and closed my eyes. It was real. This was not a nightmare. This was my life. My husband, the man who vowed to love and cherish me, was poisoning me. He was feeding me death with a smile every morning. The drive home was a blur. My mind was racing. If he was willing to kill me for money, he was willing to do anything. I needed eyes inside the house. I needed to see what he did when I was not looking. I stopped at a high-end electronics store on the way back. I bought 3 motion-activated spy cameras. They were tiny, designed to look like USB wall chargers and smoke detectors. I pulled into the driveway and checked the time. David would not be home for another 4 hours. I had time. I went into the kitchen first. This was his territory. He loved to cook, or rather, he loved to perform the act of cooking while I cleaned up. I plugged one of the camera chargers into the outlet above the granite counter where he usually prepared my morning smoothie and vitamins. The lens was microscopic, invisible to the naked eye unless you were looking for it. I tested the feed on my phone. The picture was crisp and clear. I could see the entire kitchen island. I could see the exact spot where he would stand to mix the poison. Next, I went to the bedroom. I replaced the smoke detector on the ceiling with the one I had bought. It had a wide-angle lens that covered the bed and the nightstand. I wanted to record him bringing me the pills. I wanted the jury to see his face as he handed me the poison. I wanted them to see the kiss he would give me afterward, the kiss of a Judas. Once the cameras were active, I felt a strange sense of power. For years I had been the blind wife, the trusting fool. Now I was the watcher. I went into David's study. He usually kept it locked, but I knew where the spare key was hidden inside a hollowed-out book on the hallway shelf. I unlocked the door and stepped inside. The room smelled of leather and expensive cigars. It was a shrine to his ego. Awards he had bought framed articles about deals he had barely participated in. I sat at his mahogany desk and opened the bottom drawer. It was locked. I used a letter opener to pry the lock mechanism. It was flimsy and popped open with a satisfying snap. Inside were stacks of file folders. I pulled them out one by one. I found the trust fund documents at the bottom. My parents had left me a substantial trust managed by a private firm. I had given David limited power of attorney years ago to handle minor investment decisions because I found the paperwork tedious. It was the biggest mistake of my life. I opened the most recent quarterly statement. My breath hitched. The balance was significantly lower than it should have been. I flipped through the transaction history. There were dozens of withdrawals labeled as capital calls and property maintenance fees. Hundreds of thousands of dollars had been moved out of the trust and into an account named DJ Holdings LLC. DJ Holdings, David Jenkins. I pulled out the authorization forms for these transfers. At the bottom of each page was a signature, Sarah Jenkins. It looked like my signature. The slant was right. The loops were right. But as I looked closer, I saw the hesitation marks, the slight tremor in the ink where the pen had paused. It was a forgery. A very good one, but a forgery nonetheless. I compared the dates of the withdrawals with the dates on the calendar. March 15th, a withdrawal of $50,000. That was the week we went to the vineyards, and I was sick with the flu. He had stayed home to take care of me. He must have spent the day practicing my signature and draining my inheritance while I slept off a fever in the next room. April 2nd, $100,000. That was the day of my mother's memorial service. While I was crying at her grave, he was stealing the money she left me. I felt a cold rage burning in my chest. It was not just about the money, it was the violation. He had taken everything my parents built for me and funneled it into his secret life with Amber. He had used my legacy to fund his betrayal. I calculated the total. He had drained nearly 60% of the liquid assets in the trust. Millions of dollars gone. I took photos of every document. I took photos of the forged signatures. I took photos of the bank statements showing the transfers to his shell company. Then I found a folder marked Insurance. Inside was a copy of my life insurance policy. There was a sticky note attached to the front page in David's handwriting. Beneficiary update processed. Contestability period ends May 1st. May 1st. That was 3 weeks away. The contestability period is a window of time, usually 2 years after a policy is issued or changed, during which the insurance company can investigate and deny a claim. Once that period expires, it is much harder for them to deny a payout. David was waiting for the clock to run out. He was keeping me alive just long enough to ensure the insurance company would pay out without a fight. He had a schedule. My death was marked on his calendar like a business meeting. I put the folder back. I arranged the papers exactly as I had found them. I locked the drawer and repaired the latch as best I could so it wouldn't look tampered with. I walked out of the study and locked the door. I went back to the kitchen and poured myself a glass of water. My hands were steady now. The fear was gone. In its place was a clarity sharper than any diamond. He thought he was the player. He thought he was moving pieces on a board, and I was just a pawn to be sacrificed. He was wrong. I looked directly into the hidden camera on the wall charger. "I am not the pawn, David," I whispered to the empty room. "I am the queen, and I am about to take everything." I heard the garage door open. The rumble of his engine vibrated through the floor. He was home early. I took a deep breath. I smoothed my hair. I put a smile on my face. It was the same smile I had worn for 10 years, the smile of a loving, devoted wife. But behind it, I was sharpening my knives. The front door opened. "Honey, I am home," David called out, his voice cheerful and warm. I walked into the foyer to greet him. "Hi, darling," I said, walking into his arms. He kissed me. I smelled her perfume on his collar. It was faint, but it was there beneath the expensive cologne. "How was your day?" he asked, looking into my eyes with that practiced sincerity. I smiled wider. "It was enlightening," I said. He did not catch the double meaning. He just patted my arm and walked past me into the kitchen, unaware that he was walking into a trap, unaware that the woman standing behind him was no longer his victim. She was his executioner. I sat on the edge of the bed in the guest room with the lights off, holding my phone in a grip so tight my fingers ached. The screen cast a pale, ghostly glow on my face, illuminating the tears I refused to let fall. On the screen was a live feed from the kitchen downstairs. The camera I had hidden in the wall charger was working perfectly. It showed the granite island, the gleaming stainless steel appliances, and the bouquet of white lilies David had placed on the counter moments ago. Lilies, the flowers of funerals. It was a nice touch, David. I watched as my husband moved around the kitchen. He had removed his suit jacket and rolled up the sleeves of his white dress shirt. He looked like the picture of a devoted husband preparing a meal for his hard-working wife. He was making carbonara, my favorite dish. I used to love watching him cook. I used to love the way he hummed to himself while he chopped parsley, the way he would taste the sauce and nod with satisfaction. Now watching him felt like watching a predator sharpen its claws. He opened the wine fridge and pulled out a bottle of Cabernet. It was a vintage we had been saving for a special occasion. I suppose murder was special enough for him. He uncorked the bottle with practiced ease and poured 2 large glasses. He set one aside for himself. The other he placed directly in front of the hidden camera as if he were performing for an audience he did not know existed. My heart hammered against my ribs as I saw him reach into his pocket. He pulled out a small folded piece of paper. He looked over his shoulder toward the hallway, checking to make sure I was not coming down. The coast was clear. He unfolded the paper and tipped a fine white powder into my wine glass. I watched in high-definition horror as the white dust hit the deep red liquid. It swirled for a moment, floating on the surface like a toxic cloud, before David picked up a spoon and stirred it in. He stirred gently, efficiently, making sure every grain was dissolved. Then he lifted the glass to the light, inspecting it for any residue. Satisfied, he wiped the rim of the glass with a napkin and set it back down on the counter. He picked up his own glass, took a sip, and smiled. It was a cold, empty smile that did not reach his eyes. Then he turned back to the stove and continued stirring the pasta sauce as if he had not just prepared a lethal dose of anticoagulant for the woman he had vowed to protect. I felt a wave of nausea so strong I had to put the phone down. I rushed to the bathroom and dry heaved over the sink. There was nothing in my stomach but bile and fear. I splashed cold water on my face. I looked at myself in the mirror. My skin was pale. My eyes were wide with terror. "You have to go down there, Sarah," I told my reflection. "You have to eat his food. You have to smile. You have to pretend you do not know that the man downstairs is trying to kill you." I took a deep breath, forcing the air into my lungs. I applied a fresh coat of lipstick to hide the trembling of my lips. I pinched my cheeks to bring some color back into them. I was not just a book editor anymore. I was an actress in the most important role of my life. I walked down the stairs. Every step felt like walking into a lion's den. I could smell the bacon and the garlic from the kitchen. It smelled delicious, which made it all the more grotesque. David looked up as I entered the room. His face lit up with that boyish charm that had won me over 10 years ago. "Hey, beautiful," he said. "You are just in time. Dinner is almost ready." I forced the corners of my mouth up. It felt like my face was made of clay. "It smells amazing," I said. My voice sounded thin but steady. He walked over to me and wrapped his arms around my waist. He pulled me in for a kiss. I had to fight every instinct in my body not to recoil. I let him kiss me. I let his lips touch mine, knowing those same lips had probably kissed Amber just hours ago, knowing those lips had whispered plans of my death. "I brought you flowers," he said, gesturing to the lilies. "I know you have been working hard on that manuscript. I thought you deserved a treat." "Thank you," I said, stepping out of his embrace. "They are lovely." I walked over to the island, avoiding looking at the wine glasses. I busied myself with getting the silverware. "Why the fancy dinner?" I asked, trying to keep the conversation light. "Is there something we are celebrating?" David laughed. He turned off the burner and began plating the pasta. "Do I need a reason to cook for my wife?" he asked. "But actually I did close a small deal today. Nothing huge, but enough to keep the lights on. I thought we should toast to it." A small deal. He was probably talking about the money he had stolen from my trust fund. He carried the plates to the dining table. Then he went back for the wine. I stood by my chair, my hands gripping the back of the wood so hard my knuckles turned white. He walked over carrying a glass in each hand. He held out the glass on his left, the one I had seen him spike. "Here you go, darling," he said. I took the glass. The stem felt cold against my fingers. The red liquid sloshed gently against the sides. It looked like blood. David sat down opposite me. He raised his own glass. To us, he said, his eyes locking onto mine. To our future. The irony was sickening. He was toasting to a future where I was 6 feet underground. To us, I repeated. He brought his glass to his lips and took a long drink. Then he lowered it and looked at me expectantly. He was waiting. He needed me to drink. He needed the poison to get into my system tonight so the levels would be high enough for the main event next week. I lifted the glass. I brought it closer to my face. I could smell the oak and the berries of the wine, but underneath it, I imagined I could smell the metallic tang of the chemical. David was watching me intently. He had stopped eating. His fork was hovering halfway to his mouth. His gaze was fixed on my hand. "Go on," he urged gently. "It is really good. It needs to breathe a little, but it opens up nicely." I touched the glass to my lips. I kept my mouth closed tight. I tilted the glass just enough to make it look like I was sipping, but not a drop entered my mouth. I said, lowering the glass. "You are right, it is bold." David frowned slightly. He saw that the level of liquid in my glass had not gone down. "You barely touched it," he said. "Is something wrong? Do you not like it?" "No, it is fine," I said. "I am just a little headachy today. I am not sure if alcohol is the best idea." David's expression shifted instantly. The charm vanished, replaced by a look of intense, almost predatory concern. "You have a headache?" he asked, leaning forward. "Where does it hurt? Is it a sharp pain or a dull throb?" "It is just stress, David," I said. "You've been having a lot of headaches lately, Sarah," he said, his voice dropping to a serious tone. "And you look pale. Are you sure you are okay? Maybe you should drink the wine. It helps thin the blood. It might help with the pressure. Thin the blood." The audacity of him. He was using medical truths to sell me a lie. I looked at the glass again. I knew I couldn't fake it all night. He would notice if I didn't finish it. He would be suspicious. I needed to get rid of it. I reached for the salt shaker with my left hand, while holding the wine glass in my right. As I did, I deliberately let my elbow jerk. I slammed my arm into the side of the wine glass. It happened in slow motion. The glass tipped over. The red wine splashed across the pristine white tablecloth, spreading like a gunshot wound. The glass hit the edge of the table and shattered onto the floor, sending shards of crystal everywhere. "Oh my God," I cried, jumping up from my chair. "I am so clumsy. I am so sorry, David." I grabbed my napkin and started dabbing frantically at the spreading stain. David did not move at first. He just stared at the spilled wine. His jaw tightened. I saw a flash of pure, unadulterated rage in his eyes. It lasted only a second, but it was terrifying. He had wasted a dose. He had wasted his carefully prepared weapon. Then the mask slipped back into place. "Sarah," he said, standing up. "Stop. Leave it." He walked around the table and grabbed my shoulders, pulling me away from the mess. "I am sorry," I stammered, playing the part of the distressed wife. My hand just slipped. "I do not know what is wrong with me today." David looked down at me. He scanned my face, his eyes searching for something. "You are shaking," he said. "Look at your hands, Sarah. You are trembling." I was trembling because I was standing next to my murderer. But he didn't need to know that. "I told you I do not feel well," I whispered. He put the back of his hand against my forehead. His skin felt like ice. "You feel a little warm," he lied. "And you are uncoordinated. The headache, the shaking. This is not just stress, Sarah. I am worried about you." He guided me away from the table, away from the mess. "Sit down on the couch," he ordered gently. "I will clean this up. Do not touch the glass, you might cut yourself. You are obviously not in a state to handle sharp objects." He went to the kitchen to get paper towels. I sat on the sofa watching him. He was angry. I could tell by the stiff way he walked. He was annoyed that his plan had been interrupted, but he was also using this. He was building the narrative. He came back and started soaking up the wine. "You know," he said without looking up, "this clumsiness. It is a symptom of what I asked." David paused. He looked at the red, soaked paper towels in his hands. "I have been reading up on it," he said. "With your family history of high blood pressure, these headaches, the confusion, dropping things, it could be signs of a mini-stroke or something vascular." He stood up and walked over to me. He sat down on the coffee table right in front of me, so he was looking up into my face. He took my hands in his. Sarah, he said, his voice thick with fake emotion. I am scared. I do not want to lose you. You need to take better care of yourself. You need to make sure you take your vitamins every single day. You need to rest. I looked into his eyes. They were blue and beautiful and completely empty of soul. I will, David, I said. I promise. Good, he said. He squeezed my hands tight, too tight. I will make you another glass, he said, standing up. You need to relax. No, I said quickly. No more wine. My stomach is turning. I think I just want to go to bed. David hesitated. He looked at the kitchen where the bottle was. He calculated the risk. If he forced me, it would look suspicious. Okay, he said. You go up. I will clean up here. I will bring you some herbal tea. I stood up. My legs felt weak. Thank you, David, I said. You are too good to me. I turned and walked toward the stairs. I could feel his eyes boring into my back. I walked up the stairs, slowly holding onto the railing. As soon as I was out of his sight, I ran to the bathroom and locked the door. I turned on the faucet to mask the sound of my breathing. I had survived dinner. But I knew the game was only just beginning. He would try again. Maybe in the tea. Maybe in the morning coffee. I could never eat or drink anything in this house again. I looked at the camera feed on my phone. David was in the kitchen. He was pouring the rest of the wine bottle down the sink. He looked furious. He took the empty bottle and smashed it into the recycling bin. Then he pulled out his phone. I watched him type a message. My phone buzzed in my pocket. It wasn't a text from him. It was a notification from the spy app. It had picked up audio. I put my earbuds in and turned up the volume. I heard David's voice clear as day. He was leaving a voice note. She spilled it, he hissed. Clumsy bitch. No, I cannot do it tonight. She is acting weird. She is jumpy. I have to wait. Yes, I know we are on a timeline. Do not pressure me, Amber. I will handle it. Just make sure the trust paperwork is ready. I want the transfer to happen the second the death certificate is signed. He ended the call and ran his hands through his hair. I took the earbuds out. I had him. I had the recording. I sat on the cold tile floor of the bathroom, and for the first time that day, I let myself cry. But they were not tears of sadness. They were tears of relief. He thought I was the clumsy bitch. He thought I was the victim. He had no idea that while he was cleaning up spilled wine, I was preparing to clean up my life, and I wasn't going to leave a single stain behind. The next morning, I made the call. I should have made years ago. I did not call the police, and I did not call a therapist. I called Michael Ross. We had gone to law school together a lifetime ago before I dropped out to pursue publishing, and he went on to become the most feared divorce attorney in Manhattan. They called him the Shark of Wall Street because when he smelled blood in the water, he did not just bite, he consumed. I met him at his office on the 45th floor of a glass tower in Midtown. I sat in a leather chair that probably cost more than my car and laid everything out on his mahogany desk. The toxicology report, the hidden camera footage of David spiking my wine, the forged trust fund documents, the photos of the twins. Michael read through the files in silence. His face was a mask of professional detachment, but I saw his jaw tighten as he read the lab results. When he finally looked up, his eyes were cold and hard. "He is trying to kill you, Sarah," he said. "This is not just grounds for divorce. This is attempted murder. We should call the district attorney right now." I shook my head. "No," I said. "If we arrest him now, what happens to the money?" Michael sighed and leaned back in his chair. He took off his glasses and rubbed the bridge of his nose. "That is the problem," he said. "I reviewed the trust documents you sent. He has been siphoning funds for 3 years. The accounts are drained, Sarah. He has moved the money into offshore shells and crypto assets that are notoriously hard to trace. If we arrest him today, the feds will freeze everything. The litigation to get your money back could take a decade. By the time you see a dime, the lawyers will have taken the rest." I felt a pit form in my stomach. "So he wins?" I asked. "He goes to jail, but I am left destitute." "Not necessarily," Michael said. He leaned forward, his shark eyes gleaming. "David is arrogant, and like all arrogant men, he believes he is the smartest person in the room. He thinks you are the naive artist wife who doesn't understand finance. We can use that." "What do you mean?" I asked. Michael tapped the file on his desk. "He has stolen your money, but he hasn't spent all of it yet. He is hoarding it. He is preparing for his new life with Amber. We need him to bring that money back to you voluntarily." I laughed, a harsh, dry sound. Voluntarily. David would never give me a cent. "He will if he thinks he is saving himself," Michael said. "Listen to me. The IRS is cracking down on shell companies this year. It is all over the news. We are going to manufacture a crisis. You are going to go home and tell him that your family trust is being audited. You are going to tell him that the auditors are looking for any connection to him." I listened intently as Michael outlined the plan. It was brilliant and it was dangerous. It relied entirely on David's greed and his fear of getting caught. "He will panic," Michael explained. "He knows his name is all over those forged documents. If the auditors find them, he goes to prison for fraud. You are going to offer him a lifeboat. You are going to tell him that the only way to protect the assets is to move them temporarily into a blind trust that has no legal connection to him. A trust that you control. He will think he is hiding the stolen money from the government," Michael continued. "But in reality, he will be signing it right back over to you. And once the money is in your account, we drop the hammer." I left Michael's office with a thick envelope of legal documents and a plan that made my heart race. But before I went home to face my husband, I had one more stop to make. I drove to the hospice center on the outskirts of the city. The smell of antiseptic and fading lilies hit me as soon as I walked through the sliding doors. It was the smell of waiting for the end. I found room 304. Doris looked worse than she had yesterday. She was hooked up to a morphine drip and her breathing was shallow. But when she saw me, her eyes opened wide. "You came back," she whispered. I pulled a chair up to her bedside. I took her hand. It felt fragile like dry parchment paper. "I saw the lawyer," I said. "We have a plan." Doris tried to sit up, but she was too weak. I adjusted her pillows for her. "Tell me," she said. I told her everything. I told her about the poison being warfarin. I told her about the millions David had stolen, and I told her about Michael's trap. "We are going to make him think he's about to lose everything to the taxman," I said. "We are going to make him panic. And in his panic, he is going to give me back every penny he stole." Doris listened, a small smile forming on her cracked lips. "He is terrified of the IRS," she wheezed. "He always has been. He cheats on his taxes every year. He keeps 2 sets of books. If you tell him the auditors are coming, he will do anything to hide the trail." I squeezed her hand. "I need your help, Doris," I said. "I need you to be the final nail in the coffin. Anything she said. I have nothing left to lose." I pulled out my phone. "I need a video," I said. "I need you to record a statement. I need you to tell the world exactly what your daughter and my husband have been doing. I need you to confirm the affair, the children, and the plot to kill me." Doris nodded. Tears welled up in her eyes again. "It will destroy Amber," she said softly. "Amber destroyed herself when she decided to help a man murder his wife," I said firmly. Doris closed her eyes for a moment. I could see the internal struggle, the war between a mother's love and a moral imperative. Finally, she opened her eyes. They were clear. "Do it," she said. "Record it." I propped my phone up on the bedside table. I hit record. Doris looked into the camera. She took a deep breath, summoning the last of her strength. "My name is Doris Sullivan." She began, her voice stronger than I expected. "And I am giving this testimony on my deathbed. My daughter Amber Sullivan has been having an affair with David Jenkins for 8 years. They have 2 children together, and for the last 3 months they have been conspiring to poison David's wife Sarah." She spoke for 10 minutes. She gave details only an insider would know. She talked about the house I unknowingly bought for them. She talked about the school tuition. She talked about the nights David came over complaining that the poison wasn't working fast enough. When she finished, she slumped back against the pillows, exhausted. I stopped the recording. I looked at her. "Thank you," I said. Doris looked at the ceiling. "I never thought my life would end like this," she said. "Betraying my own child." "You are not betraying her," I said. "You are stopping her from becoming a murderer. You are saving her soul, even if she has to spend the rest of her life in prison to cleanse it." Doris turned her head to look at me. "When are you going to do it?" she asked. "Next week," I said. "On our anniversary. He is planning a big party. He wants to show off. He thinks by then I will be dead or hospitalized." Doris let out a dry chuckle. He always did love a spectacle, she said. We sat in silence for a while, just two women bound by a tragedy we didn't create. I have to go, I said, standing up. I have to go home and cook dinner for my husband. I have to play the part. Doris reached out and grabbed my wrist again. Be careful, Sarah, she said. A cornered rat bites. I know, I said. But he doesn't know he is cornered yet. He thinks he is the cat. I walked out of the hospital feeling a strange sense of peace. I had my team. I had my evidence. I had my plan. David had spent 10 years building a house of cards. He thought he was the king. He didn't realize that the wind was picking up and I was the storm. The drive back to my house felt like a military operation. I rehearsed my lines. I practiced my facial expressions in the rearview mirror. Fear, confusion, panic. I needed to look like a woman on the verge of a breakdown. I pulled into the driveway. David's car was there. I took a deep breath. Showtime. I walked into the house, slamming the front door behind me. I dropped my keys on the floor with a loud clatter. David! I screamed, my voice shrill and terrified. David, where are you? He came running from the living room, looking alarmed. Sarah, what is it? He asked. What happened? I collapsed into his arms, sobbing fake tears. It is over, David, I cried. It is all over. The lawyer called. The IRS is freezing the trust. They know about everything. I felt his body stiffen. The concern on his face vanished, replaced by the cold calculation I had come to recognize. What do you mean they know? He asked, his voice sharp. What exactly did they say, Sarah? They said there are irregularities. I sobbed, burying my face in his chest so he couldn't see my dry eyes. They said someone has been moving money. They are launching a full audit on Monday. David, they are going to take the house. They are going to take your business. They are going to put us in jail. David pushed me back to look at me. His eyes were darting back and forth, processing the threat. Did you tell them anything he demanded? Did you mention my name? No, I lied. But they will find out. The lawyer said the only way to save it is to move the assets out of the country before the audit starts. But I do not know how to do that, David. I am scared. A slow smile spread across David's face. It was the smile of a predator who sees a wounded animal. Do not worry, baby, he said, pulling me back into a hug. I will handle it. I know exactly what to do. He held me tight. I will protect you, he whispered. I let him hold me. I let him think he was the hero. Little did he know he had just signed his own death warrant, and I was the one holding the pen. The weekend arrived wrapped in a suffocating blanket of tension. The house felt smaller than usual, as if the walls were closing in on us. I had spent the entire night tossing and turning, pretending to be consumed by anxiety, while David slept soundly beside me. He was probably dreaming of the millions he thought he was about to inherit. I was dreaming of the look on his face when he realized he had lost. Saturday morning broke with a gray, drizzling sky that perfectly matched the mood I was orchestrating. I sat at the kitchen island, surrounded by stacks of paper. I was wearing my old college sweatshirt and no makeup, my hair pulled back in a messy bun. I wanted to look like a woman who had given up, a woman who was drowning. David walked into the kitchen at 9. He was wearing his running gear, looking fresh and energetic. He poured himself a cup of coffee and leaned against the counter, watching me. You have been up all night, he said. You need to sleep, Sarah. You are going to make yourself sick. I looked up at him, my eyes red and swollen from the eye drops I had applied earlier. How can I sleep, David? I asked, my voice trembling. Look at this. I pushed a document toward him. It was a masterpiece of forgery created by Michael Ross. It was a notice of intent to levy from the IRS. The paper was heavy, the font was official, and the language was terrifying. It stated that due to discrepancies in the Jenkins family trust, all assets were subject to immediate freezing and potential seizure pending a full forensic audit. David picked up the paper. I watched his eyes scan the text. I saw the moment his pupils dilated. He wasn't scared for me. He was scared for his payday. This is dated 2 days ago, he said. Why didn't you get this sooner? It was sent to the old address. I lied. The lawyers just forwarded it to me. David, they are talking about freezing the accounts on Monday morning. Once they freeze them, we cannot touch a cent. They will lock everything down for months, maybe years. David put the paper down. He ran a hand through his hair, pacing the length of the kitchen. Years, he muttered. He was doing the math. He couldn't wait years. He had debts. He had a mistress who demanded luxury. He had a plan to kill me next week, and that plan relied on him having immediate access to the money. "We have to do something," he said, turning back to me. "We cannot let them freeze the assets." I buried my face in my hands. "I don't know what to do," I sobbed. "I called the lawyer this morning. He said there is only one way to protect the principal. He said we have to move the liquid assets out of the trust before the banks open on Monday. We have to transfer them to a clean, independent entity that the IRS cannot link to the audit." David stopped pacing. He looked at me, and I could practically hear the gears turning in his head. "A clean entity?" he repeated. "Yes," I said, wiping my nose with a tissue. He said, "If we move the money to a new LLC one that has no history and no direct link to my parents' estate, we can shield it. We can say it was an investment transfer. By the time the auditors unravel it, the audit will be over and the money will be safe. But I do not have a company like that, David. I only have the trust." I looked at him with wide, pleading eyes. "I am going to lose it all," I whispered. "My parents' legacy. It is all going to disappear because I was too stupid to pay attention to the paperwork." David walked over to me. He put his hands on my shoulders and massaged them gently. It was the touch of a man calming a hysterical child. "Shh, stop that," he said soothingly. "You are not stupid. You are just overwhelmed, and you are not going to lose anything. I won't let that happen." He paused, letting the silence hang in the air for a moment. "I can help you, Sarah," he said softly. I looked up at him, sniffing. "How?" I asked. "I have companies," David said. "I have real estate holding companies. We could transfer the funds to one of my accounts. I can hold it for you until the heat dies down." I held my breath. This was the moment. I had to play this perfectly. If I said yes too quickly, he might get suspicious. If I said no, he might get angry. "I don't know," I said, chewing my lip. "The lawyer said it has to be a brand new entity. He said if we use a company that already has transactions, the IRS will flag it immediately. He said it needs to be a shell. Something empty." David frowned. He was disappointed that his easy solution was rejected, but he bought the logic. He prided himself on knowing business, even though he was terrible at it. "He is right," David said, nodding sagely. "Commingling funds would be a red flag. We need a fresh vehicle." He looked at the clock. "I can set one up," he said. "I can go online right now and register a new LLC in Delaware. I can have the tax ID in an hour. We can open a corporate bank account online." I hesitated. "But who would run it?" I asked. "I cannot be on the paperwork, David. If my name is on the registration, the IRS will find it in 5 minutes. David smiled. It was a smile of pure greed masquerading as benevolence. "I will do it," he said. "I will be the registered agent. I will put it in my name. The IRS isn't auditing me, Sarah. I am clean. If I hold the assets, they cannot touch them. I will just be the custodian. You will still own the money, but legally on paper, it will look like it belongs to an outside investor." I let out a long, shaky breath of relief. "You would do that for me?" I asked. "You would take that risk?" "For you, I would do anything," David said, kissing the top of my head. "We are partners, Sarah. What is yours is mine, and what is mine is yours. We have to protect our future." Our future. He meant his future with Amber. "Okay," I said. "Let us do it." For the next 3 hours, we sat at the dining table working. David was in his element. He typed furiously on his laptop, setting up the company. He called it Phoenix Asset Management. He thought the name sounded powerful. I thought it sounded ironic since he was about to go down in flames. While he worked on the registration, I pretended to gather the transfer codes for the trust. In reality, I was texting Michael. "Target is engaged," I typed under the table. "He is setting up the shell." Michael replied instantly. "Remember the operating agreement. That is the key. Do not let him file the standard template. Use the one I sent you." I waited until David was finished with the state registration. "Okay," he said, spinning the laptop around. "The company is live. I just need to file the operating agreement. I will just download a standard boilerplate form." "Wait," I said, reaching for my bag. The lawyer sent me a specific one. I pulled out a thick, stapled document. He said we have to use this structure, I explained. It is a special purpose vehicle agreement. He said it has specific language about asset protection and liability shields. He said if we use a standard form, the IRS might pierce the corporate veil. David took the document. He flipped through the pages. It was dense, full of legal jargon and complex clauses. David hated reading. He was a headlines guy. He looked at the first page where it listed him as the managing director. He saw his name in bold letters at the top. That was all he needed to see. He did not read page 12. He did not read the section on member control. If he had read it, he would have seen that while he was the managing director, the company had two classes of members. Class A was him, Class B was me, and the agreement stated that Class B members held 100% of the voting rights and had the unilateral power to remove the managing director at any time without cause. It also stated that any assets transferred into the company became the irrevocable property of the Class B member upon deposit. Basically, he was building a vault, putting his name on the door, and giving me the only key. "This looks standard," David said, tossing the document onto the table. "Just a lot of lawyer speak to justify his hourly rate." He grabbed a pen. "Where do I sign?" he asked. I turned to the signature page. My heart was pounding so hard I thought he might hear it. This was it. The moment he signed this document, he was handing me back my life. "Right here," I said, pointing to the line. David didn't hesitate. He signed his name with a flourish. The ink was dark and permanent. "Done," he said, capping the pen. "Now transfer the money," he commanded. I opened my laptop. I logged into the trust portal. I had already set up the wire transfers. I just needed to hit authorize. $6 million. The remaining balance of my inheritance, plus the liquidation of 2 investment accounts I had managed to salvage. I entered the routing number for the new bank account David had just opened. "Are you sure this is safe?" I asked, my finger hovering over the mouse. David leaned in close. I could smell the coffee on his breath. "It is the only way, Sarah," he said. "Do it. Trust me." I looked at him. "I do trust you, David," I said. I clicked the button. Transfer complete. The screen flashed green. David let out a whoop of excitement. He grabbed me and hugged me, lifting me off the chair. "We did it," he shouted. "We saved it." He was ecstatic. He thought he had just tricked me into handing him $6 million. He thought he now controlled the money. He thought he could transfer it to Amber whenever he wanted. He spun me around and I laughed with him. "Thank you, David," I said, burying my face in his neck. "Thank you for saving us. Let's celebrate," he said, setting me down. "I am going to open that champagne, the good stuff." He practically skipped to the kitchen. I stood by the table, looking at the signed operating agreement. I picked it up and slipped it into my folder. The money was gone from the trust. It was now in Phoenix Asset Management. And Phoenix Asset Management belonged to me. David popped the cork in the kitchen. To Phoenix, he called out, raising a glass. "To Phoenix," I whispered. I walked into the kitchen. David handed me a glass of champagne. "You know," he said, taking a sip, "this takes a huge weight off my shoulders. With the money safe, we can focus on other things, like the anniversary party next week." "Yes," I said. "The party? I want it to be perfect," David said. "I invited everyone. The partners from the firm, our friends, my family. I want everyone to see how happy we are." I looked at him over the rim of my glass. He was glowing with victory. He had the money. He had the plan to kill me. He had the audience for his performance as the grieving widower. "It will be perfect," I said. "It will be a night no one will ever forget." David finished his champagne in one gulp. "I have to run out for a bit," he said, checking his watch. "I have to go meet a contractor about a property." He was going to see Amber. He was going to tell her that he had secured the bag. He was going to tell her that I was a gullible fool who had just handed him the keys to the kingdom. "Go," I said. "I will be fine. I am just going to rest." David kissed me on the cheek. "You do that," he said. "Get your strength up. You are going to need it." He grabbed his keys and left whistling a tune as he walked out the door. I waited until I heard his car leave the driveway. Then I picked up my phone. I dialed Michael. "It is done," I said. "Is the document signed?" Michael asked. "Signed and witnessed," I said. "The money is in the account." "Good," Michael said. "I will file the papers with the state on Monday morning. By the time the sun rises on your anniversary, you will legally own him." I hung up. I walked to the window and looked out at the gray sky. The rain had stopped. A single ray of sunlight was breaking through the clouds. David thought he had won. He thought I was weak. He thought I was stupid. He had no idea that while he was playing checkers, I was playing chess. And I had just put his king in checkmate. I went back to the kitchen and poured the rest of the champagne down the sink. I did not want to celebrate yet. The real celebration would be next week, when the world would see David Jenkins for exactly what he was. And I would be the one holding the spotlight. While David was sitting at our dining table feeling like the master of the universe, I walked out the front door and got into my car. He was too busy transferring my millions into the trap I had set to notice that I was leaving. He probably thought I was going to the grocery store to buy ingredients for a celebratory dinner. He had no idea I was driving to the scene of his crime. I drove slowly through the winding streets of our town. The GPS on my phone was set to an address I had memorized from the stolen documents. 12 Oakwood Lane. It was only 15 minutes away from my own driveway. For 8 years, my husband had been living a double life less than 10 miles from where I slept. He had driven these streets thousands of times. He had memorized the potholes and the stop signs. He had built a routine, a commute between his wife and his mistress, and I had been completely blind to it. The neighborhood was exclusive. The houses were set back from the road, hidden behind high hedges and wrought iron gates. It was the kind of place where old money lived, where privacy was the most expensive commodity. As I turned onto Oakwood Lane, my heart began to hammer against my ribs. I slowed the car down, scanning the house numbers, and then I saw it. Number 12. It was magnificent. It was a sprawling Victorian estate with a wrap-around porch and a meticulously landscaped lawn. It was painted a soft dove gray with white shutters. It looked like a dollhouse. It looked like a dream, and I had paid for every single shingle on the roof. I parked my car a few houses down around a bend in the road so it wouldn't be immediately visible from the driveway. I sat there for a moment, gripping the steering wheel. My hands were shaking. I wasn't shaking from fear anymore. I was shaking from a potent cocktail of rage and adrenaline. This was the house David had told me was a distressed asset. He told me it was a gut job, a ruin that needed a complete overhaul. He had shown me fake photos of a crumbling foundation and water-damaged walls. He had taken checks from me written for structural repairs and used them to buy imported marble and custom cabinetry. I reached into the passenger seat and picked up the prop I had prepared. It was a simple clipboard with a few generic forms attached to it. I put on a pair of oversized sunglasses and a baseball cap. I wasn't Sarah Jenkins, the betrayed wife. I was a nameless market researcher doing a neighborhood survey. It was a flimsy disguise, but arrogance is a powerful blinder. Amber wouldn't be looking for me because in her mind I was already a ghost. I was just the dying woman who was about to vacate her spot. I stepped out of the car. The air was fresh and smelled of cut grass and blooming jasmine. I walked down the sidewalk, my heels clicking softly on the pavement. As I approached the gate, I heard sounds coming from the yard. Laughter. High-pitched, joyful shrieks. I stopped. Through the gaps in the iron fence, I could see them. 2 children were running through the sprinklers on the front lawn. A boy and a girl. They looked to be about 7 years old. They were beautiful. The boy had dark, curly hair and a mischievous grin. The girl had long pigtails and was laughing as she dodged the water. I gripped the cold metal of the fence. I felt like I had been punched in the stomach. The boy turned his head, and for a second I was looking at a miniature version of David. He had the same jawline, the same way of tilting his head when he laughed. The resemblance was undeniable. It was genetic proof screaming at me from across the lawn. Tears pricked my eyes behind the sunglasses. David had told me he didn't want children. When we struggled to conceive in the early years of our marriage, he had been so supportive, so resigned. He said maybe it wasn't meant to be. He said we were enough for each other. He held me while I cried over negative pregnancy tests. He wiped my tears and told me he didn't need a legacy. All the while he had 2 healthy children growing up 10 minutes away. He wasn't infertile. He wasn't indifferent. He just didn't want children with me. I took a deep breath, forcing the pain down into the pit of my stomach where it could fuel my fire. I pushed open the gate. It wasn't locked. I walked up the long driveway. The children stopped playing as I approached. They looked at me with curiosity but no fear. They were safe, happy children living in a bubble of security that my money had purchased. "Who are you?" the boy asked. I forced a smile. It felt tight and artificial on my face. "Hi there," I said. "Is your mommy home?" Before he could answer, the front door opened. A woman stepped out onto the porch. It was Amber. I recognized her instantly from the photos on the iPad, but seeing her in the flesh was a visceral shock. She was younger than me. Her skin was glowing and tanned. She was wearing expensive yoga pants and a crop top that showed off a flat-toned stomach. She looked like an influencer. She looked like the kind of woman who drank green juice and posted inspirational quotes while sleeping with married men. She looked at me with immediate suspicion. Her posture was defensive, her chin tilted up in a gesture of natural arrogance. "Can I help you?" she asked. Her voice was sharp. She didn't like strangers in her kingdom. I walked closer, clutching my clipboard like a shield. "Good morning, ma'am," I said, affecting a bright professional tone. "My name is Jessica. I am conducting a quick survey for the Homeowners Association regarding the new recycling initiatives and property value assessments. It will only take 2 minutes." Amber sighed loud and dramatic. She checked her smartwatch. "I am really busy," she said. "I have a trainer coming in 20 minutes. I stepped onto the bottom step of the porch. I needed to keep her talking. I needed to get close. "I understand," I said. "But this is actually regarding the property values in the district. We are seeing a significant increase in this specific block, and we wanted to verify some renovation details to ensure your assessment is accurate. It could mean a lower tax rate for you." Greed. It was the universal language of the Jenkins household. Amber hesitated. The mention of property value and money softened her stance slightly. "Fine," she said, crossing her arms. "Make it quick." She shooed the kids away. "Go play in the back," she ordered. The children ran off around the side of the house. We were alone. I pretended to check something on my clipboard. "You have a beautiful home here," I said. "The renovation work is exquisite." Amber smirked. She preened slightly, smoothing her hair. "Thank you," she said. "We put a lot of work into it. My partner has very specific tastes. We imported the limestone from Italy." "Your partner?" I asked innocently. "Is he around? We usually like to get the homeowner's perspective." "He is busy," Amber said dismissively. "He is at his other house, handling some business." She said other house with such casual disdain, as if my home, the home I had built and loved, was just a storage unit for her boyfriend. "I see," I said, making a fake note. "And you have been here for how long?" 8 years, Amber said. "Well, we bought it 8 years ago, but we did major work recently. We are planning to expand the master suite soon, once we settle some legal issues." Legal issues. She meant me. I was the legal issue. I nodded, sympathetic. "Renovations can be stressful," I said, "especially with legal delays." "You have no idea," Amber said, rolling her eyes. "We are waiting on a settlement. It is taking forever. There is this whole complication with an inheritance and an old policy. It is exhausting waiting for things to resolve naturally." She was talking about my death. She was calling my murder a natural resolution. I felt the phone in my pocket. It was recording. But I needed more. I needed her to be specific. I needed her to say something that a jury couldn't misinterpret. "Well, hopefully it resolves soon," I said. "The market is very hot right now." Amber laughed, a cruel, humorless sound. "Oh, it will resolve," she said. "We are on a timeline. My partner assured me that by next week we will have full access to the funds. We are throwing a big party to celebrate." Suddenly, her phone rang. It was sitting on the porch railing where she had left it. The screen lit up. The caller ID said, "Hubby." My stomach turned. She had him saved as Hubby. Amber looked at the phone and then at me. "I have to take this," she said. "It is him." "Please go ahead," I said. "I will just finish these notes." She didn't go inside. She was too arrogant to think that a random survey woman mattered. She picked up the phone and swiped to answer, putting it on speaker so she could check her nails while she talked. "Hey, baby," she said, her voice shifting into a sickly sweet coo. "Hey." David's voice came through the speaker, tinny but unmistakable. "I missed you." I froze. I stood very still, focusing all my energy on the phone in my pocket, ensuring the microphone was not obstructed. "I miss you too," Amber said. "Did you do it? Did you move the money?" "I did," David said. He sounded triumphant. "She signed everything. The transfer is going through right now. $6 million, baby. It is all in the shell company." Amber squealed a sound of pure delight. "Oh my God, David, that is amazing. So we are safe. We are rich," David corrected. "And we are safe." The IRS lie worked perfectly. She was terrified. She practically begged me to take the money. I clenched my jaws so hard my teeth ached. Hearing him mock my fear, hearing him laugh about deceiving me, was physically painful. "So what about the other thing?" Amber asked, her voice dropping lower but still audible. "What about her?" "I am working on it," David said. "I gave her a double dose last night, but she spilled the wine. Clumsy idiot. But do not worry. I put it in her coffee this morning. She drank the whole thing. My blood ran cold." I remembered the coffee. He had brought it to me in bed. He had been so sweet. I had pretended to drink it, but I had poured it into the plant pot in the bathroom when he went to shower. Thank God for the plant. "Is it going to be enough?" Amber asked impatiently. "David, I am tired of waiting. You said by the anniversary she would be gone. I want to come to that party as your fiancé, not your guest. She will be gone," David promised. "The levels are building up. I am going to give her a massive dose on the night of the party, just before the guests arrive. It will look like a stroke right in the middle of the toast. It will be tragic. Everyone will see me trying to save her." Amber giggled. It was the most horrific sound I had ever heard. "You are bad," she said. "I am doing this for us," David said. "For you and the kids. I want us to be a real family. I want her out of the picture for good." "When is the funeral?" Amber asked casually, as if asking about a dinner reservation. "Probably 3 days after David said, 'Quick cremation, no autopsy.' Then we wait for the insurance check and we book that trip to the Maldives." I stood there on the porch, listening to my husband and his mistress plan the disposal of my body. They were discussing my death like it was a logistics issue, a scheduling conflict to be resolved. "Make sure you increase the dosage," Amber said. "I do not want her waking up in a hospital. I want her dead, David." "She is dead, walking," David said. "She just doesn't know it yet." Amber smiled. "Okay, baby. I love you. Hurry home." "I love you too." The call ended. Amber put the phone down and looked back at me. She seemed energized by the call, happy even. The prospect of my murder had brightened her day. "Sorry about that," she said. "Family business." I looked at her. I looked at the woman who wanted me dead so she could have my money and my husband. I looked at the woman who was raising children to believe their father was a hero. "No problem," I said. My voice was calm, terrifyingly calm. "It sounds like things are working out for you." "They are," Amber said. "They really are." I finished writing on my clipboard. I tore off a carbon copy of the fake form and handed it to her. "Here is your receipt," I said. "Thank you for your time. You have a lovely life here." Amber took the paper without looking at it. "I know," she said. I turned and walked down the steps. I walked down the long driveway, past the perfectly manicured hedges, past the children who were still playing in the distance. I walked back to my car without looking back. I got into the driver's seat and locked the doors. I pulled the phone out of my pocket. I stopped the recording. I played back the last minute. "Make sure you increase the dosage. I do not want her waking up in a hospital. I want her dead." The audio was crystal clear. I sat there in the silence of my car and let out a long, slow breath. They thought I was dead walking. They thought I was a clumsy idiot who spilled wine and signed checks. I looked at the house one last time. "Enjoy it while it lasts." "Amber," I whispered, "because the next time I come to this house, I will be coming with the police." I put the car in gear and drove away. I had walked into the lion's den, and I had walked out with their teeth in my pocket. Now it was time to go home and play the victim one last time. David came home just after sunset, carrying a thick leather portfolio tucked under his arm, like a trophy. He walked through the front door with a strut I had not seen in years. It was the walk of a man who believed he had just pulled off the heist of the century. I was sitting in the living room staring at the unlit fireplace, my hands folded in my lap, waiting for the final act of my performance. I stood up as he entered the room. I made sure my shoulders were hunched and my eyes were wide with the frantic energy of a woman on the edge of a nervous breakdown. "Did you get them?" I asked, my voice trembling. "Did you get the papers?" David tossed the portfolio onto the coffee table with a heavy thud. He loosened his tie and unbuttoned his collar, playing the role of the exhausted savior. "It was not easy, Sarah," he said, exhaling loudly. "I had to call in a lot of favors. My lawyer had to draft these emergency filings over dinner. But yes, I got them." He walked over to the wet bar and poured himself a scotch. He took a long sip, savoring the burn before turning back to me. "We are going to move everything tonight," he said. "The shell company is active. The bank account is ready. Now we just need to transfer the hard assets." Hard assets. He meant the real estate. I walked over to the coffee table and looked at the portfolio as if it were a bomb that might explode. "But is it legal, David?" I asked. "The lawyer said if we move assets after receiving notice, it could be considered fraud." David laughed. It was a patronizing sound that grated on my nerves. "It is only fraud if they catch you, Sarah," he said, walking over and opening the portfolio. "And they are not going to catch us because on paper this is not a transfer. It is a debt restructure." He pulled out a stack of documents at least an inch thick. He spread them out on the table. "Look," he said, pointing to the first pile. "This set of documents transfers the title of this house and the rental properties into the new LLC, but to make it look legitimate, the LLC has to buy them. Since the LLC has no cash yet, we are going to use a promissory note." A promissory note. This was exactly what Michael and I had discussed. "Explain it to me," I said, sitting down. "I do not understand these things, David. I'm just so scared." David sat next to me. He smelled of scotch and the faint, lingering scent of Amber's perfume. "It is simple," he said, his voice dripping with condescension. "You are selling the properties to the company. The company is giving you a note promising to pay you back in 30 years. The IRS sees a sale. They do not look closely at the terms. But here is the trick." He pulled out a document from the bottom of the stack. "I am signing a personal guarantee," he said. "To make it look ironclad, I am personally guaranteeing the debt of the company. That way, if the IRS asks why you sold your assets to a brand new entity, you can say it was because the buyer offered a full personal guarantee. It makes it look like a smart business decision, not a panic move." I looked at the document. It was indeed a personal guarantee. But David had not read the fine print. Michael had drafted it to be immediate and unconditional. It didn't just guarantee the value of the house. It guaranteed the full value of the trust fund I had transferred earlier, plus penalties and interest. By signing this, David was personally acknowledging a debt to me of over $10 million. If he defaulted, or if we divorced, I could garnish his wages, seize his personal accounts, and take everything he owned. He thought he was signing a prop for a play. He was actually signing a confession of debt. "You are putting yourself at risk for me," I asked, touching his arm. "David, if the company fails, you will owe all that money." He smiled. He really thought I was stupid. "The company is not going to fail, Sarah," he said. "It is just a shell. It is us. I am paying myself. It is all smoke and mirrors, baby." He handed me a pen. "You need to sign the seller lines," he said. "I will sign the buyer and guarantor lines." I signed my name on the first few pages. My hand was steady. I was signing over my house to a company I secretly owned. I was losing nothing. "Now your turn," I said, handing the pen back to him. David took the pen. He looked at the document. Promissory note and personal guarantee. He didn't read the clauses. He didn't read the section that defined default event as including filing for divorce or any criminal charges. He just flipped to the signature page. He signed his name with a flourish. "David Jenkins." "There," I said. "Now the house is safe." "Not just this house," David said, reaching into the portfolio again. "We have to be thorough, Sarah. If the IRS sees we only moved your assets, they might get suspicious. We have to commingle. We have to make it look like a merger." He pulled out a deed. "I am moving the Oakwood property into the LLC too," he said. My heart stopped. The Oakwood property, Amber's house, the house I had visited this morning. "You are?" I asked, trying to keep my voice even. "But David, that is your investment project. You said it was your retirement plan." "It is," he said. "But we are in this together, right? If I move my asset into the same pot, it proves that this is a legitimate partnership. It protects you." He was lying, of course. He wasn't doing it to protect me. He was doing it because he thought he was the sole owner of the LLC. He thought by moving Amber's house into the company, he was securing it under his own control, away from any potential divorce settlement. He thought he was stealing his own house back from our marital assets. But he didn't know about the operating agreement I had filed an hour ago. He didn't know that the LLC was 100% owned by me. If he signed that deed, he was legally gifting his mistress's house to his wife. "Are you sure, David?" I asked. "That is a big sacrifice." "I want to do it," he said. "I want us to be safe." He placed the deed on the table. Quitclaim deed. Transfer of title. Grantor D.J. Holdings, LLC. Grantee Phoenix Asset Management. He signed the bottom line. I watched the ink dry. It was the most beautiful thing I had ever seen. With that one signature, he had evicted Amber. He had stripped her of the roof over her head. The house she had bragged about, the renovation she had overseen it all, belonged to me now. I gathered the papers into a neat stack. "Is that everything?" I asked. David nodded, closing the portfolio. "That is everything. The assets are transferred. The debt is structured. We are bulletproof." He leaned back on the sofa and closed his eyes, letting out a long sigh of relief. "You have no idea how stressed I was," he said. "I thought we were going to lose it all." I looked at him. I looked at the man who had plotted my death, the man who had mocked me to his mistress. He looked so peaceful. He looked so satisfied. He had no clue that he was now a tenant in my world. He had no clue that he was technically bankrupt. He had just signed away his fortune, his freedom, and his future. I reached out and placed my hand on his knee. "Thank you, David," I said softly. He opened his eyes and looked at me. For what he asked, for taking care of everything I said, for being so smart. I would have been lost without you. David smirked. His ego was fully inflated. "That is what I am here for, Sarah," he said. "I am the man of the house. I handle the hard stuff." I stood up and picked up the stack of signed documents. "I am going to put these in the safe," I said. "We should keep them secure." "Good idea," he said. I walked to the study. My legs felt light. I felt like I was floating. I walked into the room and closed the door. I went to the wall safe and punched in the code. I placed the documents inside. The promissory note, the personal guarantee, the deed to Amber's house. I looked at them one last time before closing the heavy steel door. These were not just papers. They were my freedom. They were my weapon. I heard David in the living room pouring another drink. He was probably texting Amber right now, telling her that the house was secure, telling her that the idiot wife had signed everything. I leaned my forehead against the cool metal of the safe and smiled. Let him drink. Let him celebrate. Because tomorrow the real audit would begin. And it wouldn't be conducted by the IRS. It would be conducted by me. I walked back into the living room. David was standing by the window looking out at the dark lawn. "You know," he said without turning around, "I was thinking about the party next week." "The anniversary party?" I asked. "Yes," he said, taking a sip of his scotch. "I think we should make a speech, a joint speech, about resilience, about overcoming challenges." I stared at his back. He wanted to make a speech about resilience before he murdered me. The irony was so thick I could taste it. "That sounds lovely, David," I said. "I would love to make a speech." He turned around and toasted me with his glass. "To us, Sarah. To the next chapter." "To the next chapter," I echoed. I walked over to him and took the glass from his hand. I took a sip. It was strong and burned my throat, but it made me feel alive. "You are the best husband," I said, looking him dead in the eye. I meant it. He was the best husband because he had just given me everything I needed to destroy him. He had just handed me the sword I would use to cut off his head. "You look tired, baby," he said, brushing a strand of hair from my face. "Why don't you go upstairs? I will clean up down here." He wanted to be alone. He wanted to call Amber. "Okay," I said. "I am tired. It has been a long day." I kissed him on the cheek. "Good night, David. Good night, Sarah." I walked up the stairs. I didn't look back. I went into the bedroom and locked the door. I took out my phone and texted Michael. "Eagle has landed. Documents are signed. We own the house." Michael replied instantly with a thumbs-up emoji. I sat on the edge of the bed and looked at the smoke detector camera on the ceiling. I pulled up the feed on my phone. David was in the living room. He was on the phone. He was laughing. He was spinning around in a circle like an excited child. I watched him for a long time. I watched him celebrate his own demise. "Laugh now, David," I whispered to the screen. "Laugh while you can, because when the music stops, you are going to find that you do not have a chair. You do not even have a floor." I turned off the phone and lay down on the bed. For the first time in months, I fell asleep instantly. I slept the sleep of the righteous. I slept the sleep of the victor. And when I woke up, I knew exactly what I had to do next. The trap was set. The bait was taken. Now I just had to wait for the snap. The morning of our 10th wedding anniversary arrived with a sky so blue it felt like a mockery of the storm that was brewing inside my home. I woke up before the alarm, but I kept my eyes closed, listening to the rhythm of David's breathing beside me. It was steady and calm, the breathing of a man who slept the sleep of the righteous. Or in his case, the sleep of a sociopath who believed he had successfully pulled off the perfect crime. Today was the day he had been waiting for. The day he would parade me in front of our friends and family one last time, playing the role of the devoted husband before delivering the final fatal blow. I finally opened my eyes and turned to look at him. He was already stirring. He stretched his arms over his head, a smile playing on his lips. He looked at me, and the smile widened, but it didn't reach his eyes. It never did any more. "Happy anniversary, darling," he said, leaning over to kiss me. I let him kiss me. I forced myself not to flinch as his lips touched mine. "Happy anniversary, David," I whispered. He jumped out of bed, filled with a manic energy. "We have a big day ahead," he said, rubbing his hands together. "The gala is going to be spectacular." I checked the RSVP list. Everyone is coming. The mayor, the partners, even the investors from the city. They are all going to see what we have built. What he meant was they were going to see what he had stolen. He went into the bathroom to shower. I lay in bed for a moment longer, mentally preparing myself for the performance of a lifetime. I needed to be perfect today. I needed to be the glowing, happy wife. I needed to be the victim he expected me to be so that he wouldn't see the blade coming until it was buried in his chest. I got up and went to the closet. Hanging there was the dress I had bought for tonight. It was a floor-length gown made of emerald green silk. David had chosen it. He said green was my color. He didn't know that green was also the color of money, the money he thought he had secured but had actually signed away. I heard the shower turn off. I quickly walked over to his suit jacket, which was hanging on the valet stand. I checked the inside pocket. There it was, a small silver pill case. I opened it carefully. Inside, nestled among a few mints, were 2 capsules. They looked identical to my heart medication, but I knew better. I had swapped them out earlier while he was sleeping, replacing his poison with harmless sugar pills. But he didn't know that. He thought he was carrying my death in his pocket. He planned to slip them into my drink after the party when we were back in the hotel suite. He wanted me to die in my sleep, a tragic end to a perfect night. I closed the case and slipped it back into his pocket just as the bathroom door opened. David walked out, a towel wrapped around his waist. "Are you excited?" he asked, drying his hair. "I am nervous," I admitted. "It is a lot of people, David, and I have been feeling so weak lately." He walked over and put his hands on my shoulders, looking at me in the mirror. "You will be fine," he said, his voice soothing. "You just have to make it through the dinner. Then we will go upstairs to the suite and you can rest. I will take care of everything." "I bet you will," I thought. I spent the next few hours getting ready. A makeup artist came to the house. She covered the dark circles under my eyes, the result of sleepless nights plotting my revenge. She applied blush to my pale cheeks. By the time she was done, I looked like the picture of health. I looked like a woman who had everything. While I was getting my hair done, I sent the text message that would seal his fate. I had created a fake email address 3 days ago. I used the name of a high-end concierge service that David often used for his VIP clients. I had sent an email to Amber's business account. The subject line read, "Exclusive invitation, confidential guest of David Jenkins." The email was a masterpiece of manipulation. It read, "Dear Ms. Sullivan, Mr." Jenkins requests the honor of your presence at his 10th anniversary gala tonight at the Grand Hotel. As his most valued confidant, he wishes for you to witness the culmination of his professional success. He asks that you attend as an anonymous VIP client. A private table has been reserved for you in the balcony where you can observe the festivities discreetly. He has a surprise announcement regarding the future of his company, and he wants you to be the first to hear it. Please present this digital pass at the VIP entrance. I knew Amber wouldn't be able to resist. Her ego was too big. She would interpret this as David wanting to show off for her. She would think the surprise announcement was about their future, about him leaving me. She would want to be there to see his triumph. My phone buzzed. It was a notification from the email tracker. Email opened. 5 minutes later, another notification. RSVP. Confirmed. I smiled at my reflection in the mirror. The trap was set. The mistress was coming to the ball. David came back into the room dressed in his tuxedo. He looked handsome, I had to admit. He looked like a movie star. It was a shame his soul was so ugly. "You look stunning, Sarah," he said, standing behind me. "That dress is perfect." "Thank you," I said, standing up. "I bought it with the card you gave me." The card linked to the account that was now empty because I had transferred all the funds to the holding company. We walked out to the limousine waiting in the driveway. David had spared no expense. He wanted this night to be a coronation. He wanted the world to see him as a wealthy, powerful man. He didn't realize that he was spending money he no longer had. The ride to the hotel was quiet. David was busy on his phone texting. I knew who he was texting. He was probably telling Amber that he couldn't wait to see her, that tonight was the beginning of their life together. We arrived at the Grand Hotel. The valet opened the door and camera flashes blinded me. David had hired a photographer to document the night. He grabbed my hand and pulled me close, smiling for the cameras. "Smile, darling," he whispered through his teeth. "Look happy." I smiled. I dazzled. I played the part. We walked into the ballroom. It was breathtaking. Crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling, casting a golden glow over the room. The tables were set with fine china and silver. The centerpieces were massive arrangements of white lilies and orchids. David had really outdone himself. It looked like a royal wedding, or a very expensive funeral. The room was already filling up with guests. 500 people, the elite of our social circle. Business partners, politicians, friends we had known for years. They all came over to congratulate us. "Happy anniversary, Sarah. You two are an inspiration. 10 years. That is a milestone." David was in his element. He shook hands. He slapped backs. He laughed, that loud, confident laugh. He introduced me as his better half, his rock. I stood by his side, clutching my clutch bag, my knuckles white. I scanned the room. I wasn't looking for friends. I was looking for her. And then I saw her. She was standing on the balcony level, just as I had instructed in the invitation. She was wearing a black dress that was cut low in the front and high in the thigh. It was aggressive. It was bold. She wore a wide-brimmed hat and dark sunglasses, pretending to be incognito, but desperate to be seen. She was looking down at us. She was looking at David. I nudged David. "Look at all these people," I said. "You really pulled it off." "I did, didn't I?" he said, puffing out his chest. "I wanted the world to know how much I value you, Sarah." He didn't look up at the balcony. He was too busy looking at the reflection of his own vanity in the eyes of his guests. We sat down at the head table. The dinner service began. Waiters in white gloves poured champagne. David stood up to give the first toast. He tapped his glass with a spoon. The room went silent. Friends, family, colleagues. He began, his voice booming without a microphone. "Thank you for being here tonight. 10 years ago, I married the most beautiful woman in the world." He looked down at me with a look of pure adoration. "Sarah, you are my light. You are my compass. Without you, I would be nothing." A murmur of awe went through the crowd. I saw women wiping tears from their eyes. They thought it was so romantic. I looked up at the balcony. Amber was gripping the railing. Even from this distance, I could see the tension in her body. She hated this. She hated seeing him praise me. She wanted to be the one sitting in this chair. "I built this life for us," Sarah David continued. "And tonight I want to make a promise. The next 10 years will be even better. We are just getting started." He raised his glass. To Sarah. My love. My life. To Sarah. The room echoed. I raised my glass. I didn't drink, I just touched it to my lips. David sat down. He leaned over and whispered in my ear. That went well, I think. It was perfect, David, I said. You are quite the actor. He frowned slightly, confused by my tone, but then he dismissed it. I have a surprise for you later, he said, patting his jacket pocket. The pocket with the poison. I cannot wait, I said. The main course was served. Filet mignon and lobster. David ate with gusto. He was celebrating his victory. He thought the money was safe in his shell company. He thought his mistress was waiting patiently at home. He thought his wife was hours away from death. He had no idea that the woman on the balcony was about to witness his destruction. He had no idea that the shell company was owned by me. He had no idea that the poison in his pocket was sugar. I ate slowly, watching him. I memorized every detail of his face, the way he chewed, the way he wiped his mouth, the arrogance in his eyes. I wanted to remember this moment. I wanted to remember what he looked like before I broke him. Suddenly the lights in the ballroom dimmed. A spotlight hit the stage. David looked up surprised. What is this? He asked. I didn't order this. I stood up. I did, I said. David looked at me. You? He asked. What are you doing? I have a surprise for you too, David. I said loud enough for the people at our table to hear. I walked toward the stage. My legs were steady. My heart was calm. This was it, the moment of truth. I walked up the stairs to the stage and took the microphone. The spotlight blinded me for a second, but I didn't blink. I looked out at the sea of faces in the dark. Good evening, everyone, I said. My voice was clear and strong. It echoed through the massive hall. David was staring at me from the head table. He looked confused. He started to stand up, but I gestured for him to sit. Please stay seated, darling, I said. This is for you. I looked up at the balcony. I saw Amber lean forward. She thought this was the announcement. She thought I was going to announce that I was stepping down or handing over the company. 10 years is a long time, I said. A lot can happen in 10 years. People change, secrets are kept, and sometimes the truth has a way of coming out when you least expect it. I paused. The room was dead silent. You could hear a pin drop. My husband David is a man of many talents, I continued. He is a businessman, a visionary, and as he just told you, he is a devoted husband. I smiled a cold, hard smile. But David is also a very modest man. He doesn't like to talk about his other achievements. So tonight, I thought I would share them with you. I signaled to the technician in the back. Video cue, I said. Behind me, a massive LED screen descended from the ceiling. David stood up. Panic flashed across his face. He knew something was wrong. He didn't know what, but his instinct was screaming at him. Sarah, what are you doing? He hissed, moving toward the stage. Sit down, David, I commanded into the microphone. My voice boomed like thunder. He froze. The crowd turned to look at him. He couldn't make a scene. Not yet. He had to play the part. He slowly sat back down, his eyes darting around the room looking for an exit. I looked back at the audience. We prepared a little video montage, I said, a highlight reel of the last few months. I think you will find it very educational. I looked at Amber on the balcony. Watch closely, I whispered. The screen flickered to life, and the first image that appeared was not a wedding photo. It was not a vacation memory. It was a crystal-clear, high-definition video of David standing in our kitchen pouring white powder into my wine glass. The room gasped, a collective sound of shock that sucked the air out of the ballroom. The party was over. The trial had begun. The ballroom was bathed in the warm amber glow of 1,000 crystals. The air smelled of expensive perfume and roasted filet mignon. 500 of the most influential people in Connecticut were watching us. They sat at tables draped in white linen, their faces turned toward the stage with polite admiration. They saw a power couple. They saw a handsome, successful real estate mogul and his supportive, elegant wife celebrating a decade of marital bliss. David stood at the podium. He gripped the microphone with one hand and held his champagne flute with the other. He looked magnificent in his bespoke tuxedo, the lights catching the sheen of his silk lapels. He was sweating slightly under the spotlight, but to the audience it just looked like the glow of happiness. I stood a few feet behind him in the shadows, my hands clasped in front of my emerald green dress. I was the picture of the dutiful wife waiting for her moment to support her husband. David cleared his throat, and the room fell into a respectful silence. Friends, colleagues, family. He began, his voice smooth and commanding. 10 years is a long time. In business, 10 years is a lifetime. Markets crash. Empires rise and fall. But in love, 10 years is just the blink of an eye. He turned to look at me. He smiled that winning smile that had charmed me a decade ago. It was the same smile he had worn this morning when he handed me a cup of coffee laced with poison. "Sarah," he said, his voice dropping an octave to simulate intimacy, "you are my rock. You are the silent force behind every deal I close and every success I achieve. We have weathered storms together. We have faced challenges that would have broken lesser people. But we are still here, stronger than ever." He raised his glass higher. "Tonight is not just a celebration of the past. It is a promise for the future. I look at you, Sarah, and I see the rest of my life. I see us growing old together. I see us sitting on a porch somewhere holding hands watching the sunset. I promise to love you, to cherish you, and to protect you until my last breath. To us. To eternity." "To eternity," the crowd echoed. 500 glasses were raised in unison. David beamed. He brought the glass to his lips. He drank deeply, tasting the victory he thought he had won. He thought this was his coronation. He thought that in a few hours I would be dead in a hotel bed and he would be a wealthy widower free to marry his mistress. I stepped forward into the spotlight. "Thank you, David," I said into my own microphone. My voice was steady, clear, and cold as ice. "That was beautiful. Truly. You always did have a way with fiction." David frowned slightly. The crowd chuckled, thinking it was a witty wife banter. "But before we drink to the future," I said, "I think we should take a moment to really look at the present. David loves cinema. He loves a good movie. So I prepared a special screening for tonight, a documentary, if you will." I raised my hand and snapped my fingers. The lights in the ballroom cut out completely, plunging the room into darkness. A collective gasp rippled through the crowd. Suddenly, the massive LED screen behind us, which spanned 20 feet wide and 10 feet tall, roared to life. The brightness was blinding. The image on the screen was crystal clear, 4K resolution. It was a wide shot of a kitchen, our kitchen. The timestamp in the corner read yesterday, 6:42 p.m. The room went deadly silent. On the screen, David walked into the frame. He was wearing the same shirt he had worn to work yesterday. He looked over his shoulder, checking the hallway. The camera zoomed in digitally. The quality was so high you could see the beads of sweat on his forehead. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small paper packet. He opened a bottle of red wine. He poured 2 glasses. Then, with the precision of a chemist, he unfolded the paper and tapped a fine white powder into the glass on the left. I heard a woman in the front row gasp. A man whispered, "Oh my God." On the screen, David stirred the powder into the wine. He held it up to the light, checking for sediment. He smiled. It was a chilling, predatory smile. He took a sip from his own glass and then carried the poisoned glass out of frame. The video cut to black for a second. David stood frozen on the stage. His mouth was open, his glass halfway to the table. He looked at the screen, then at me, then at the crowd. He laughed a nervous, high-pitched sound. "It is a joke," he stammered into the microphone. "It is a murder mystery game. We are playing a game. Sit down, David," I said, my voice booming over the speakers. "The movie is not over." The screen lit up again. This time it was not a video. It was a series of text messages. They were projected in massive font, so even the people in the back row could read every word. The conversation was labeled Hubby and Amber. The texts began to scroll automatically. Hubby, she is still alive. The dose wasn't strong enough. She is just complaining of headaches. Amber, you need to finish it, David. I am tired of waiting. Increase the dosage. Hubby, I am worried about the autopsy. If they find the warfare and we are done. Amber, make it look like a stroke. Push her down the stairs if you have to. Just get it done. The insurance policy expires in May. We need that money for the new house. Hubby, don't worry, baby. By the anniversary, she will be history. I will give her a massive hit at the party. She will collapse in front of everyone. It will be tragic." The silence in the room was heavy and suffocating. It was the silence of 500 people realizing they were sitting in a room with a monster. David dropped his glass. It shattered on the stage, the sound exploding like a gunshot. "Turn it off," he screamed, running toward the technician booth at the side of the stage. "Turn it off right now!" But the technician had been paid by me. He had locked the door. The screen changed again. This time it was a video of a hospital bed. The image was stark and gray. A woman lay in the bed, hooked up to tubes and machines. She was bald, frail, and looked like she was already halfway to the other side. It was Doris. A murmur went through the crowd. Some people recognized her, most did not. But the gravity of a dying woman commanded respect. David stopped running. He stared at the screen, his face draining of all color. "My name is Doris Sullivan." The woman on the screen wheezed. Her voice was weak, but her eyes burned with a fierce, final energy. "I am recording this statement on my deathbed. By the time you watch this, I will be gone." She took a ragged breath. "My daughter is Amber Sullivan. For 8 years, she has been sleeping with David Jenkins. They have 2 children together, a boy and a girl. A photo of David holding the twins flashed on the screen next to Doris' face. The crowd erupted into whispers. The undeniable proof. The resemblance was striking. "But adultery is not why I am speaking today," Doris continued. "I am speaking because last week I heard my daughter and David plotting to murder his wife, Sarah." "No," David shouted. "That is a lie. She is crazy. She is senile." He looked around the room, desperate for an ally. "She is lying," he screamed. Doris continued on the screen, oblivious to his protests. "David has been stealing money from Sarah's trust fund for years. He forged her signature. And now that the money is running out, he wants the life insurance. He has been poisoning her with rat poison disguised as vitamins. He wants her dead so he can marry my daughter and live in the house Sarah paid for." Doris leaned closer to the camera. Tears streamed down her sunken cheeks. "I am a mother," she said. "I love my daughter, but I cannot let her become a killer. I cannot let an innocent woman die. David Jenkins is a thief, a liar, and a murderer. Sarah, if you are watching this, run as far as you can." The video ended. The screen went black. The only light in the room came from the spotlight that was still fixed on me. I stood there calm and composed. I looked at David. He was shaking. He looked small. The arrogance was gone, replaced by the primal fear of a trapped animal. I looked up toward the balcony. The spotlight operator knew exactly what to do. The beam of light swung up, cutting through the darkness, and landed squarely on the VIP section. There she was, Amber Sullivan. She was standing at the railing, clutching her chest. She had removed her sunglasses. Her face was a mask of absolute terror. She had come here tonight expecting to see her lover's triumph. She had come to watch me die, metaphorically, if not literally. Instead, she had just watched her own mother testify against her from the grave. The entire room turned to look at her. 500 pairs of eyes judging her. 500 people seeing the mistress, the CO conspirator, the woman who wanted to kill for money. She felt the weight of their gaze. She felt the walls closing in. "No," she screamed. It was a guttural sound, a sound of pure animalistic panic. "He made me do it," she shrieked, pointing down at David. It was his idea. He told me he would handle it. He told me she was dying anyway. Her confession echoed through the silent hall. She had just admitted everything. She had just hammered the final nail into her own coffin. David looked up at her, his eyes wide with betrayal. "Shut up!" he roared. "Shut up, you stupid bitch!" The crowd recoiled. The mask had fully slipped. The charming businessman was gone. In his place was a violent, desperate thug. I picked up the microphone one last time. "Thank you, everyone," I said. "I hope you enjoyed the show." I signaled to the back of the room. The double doors swung open. 12 police officers marched in. They were not the local beat cops. These were state troopers and detectives. Leading them was Michael Ross, my lawyer, holding a thick file of evidence. They walked straight to the stage. David tried to back away, but there was nowhere to go. He bumped into the podium, knocking it over with a loud crash. David Jenkins, a detective, announced, his voice booming without a microphone. "You are under arrest for the attempted murder of Sarah Jenkins, grand larceny, insurance fraud, and conspiracy to commit murder." Two officers grabbed David. He struggled for a second, trying to shake them off, but they slammed him against the wall of the stage. I watched as they pulled his arms behind his back. The metallic click of the handcuffs was the sweetest sound I had ever heard. Another team of officers was heading up the stairs to the balcony. I watched Amber. She was backing away from the railing, shaking her head. "I have kids!" she screamed as the officers grabbed her. "You cannot touch me. I have kids." "You should have thought about them before you tried to kill their father's wife," I thought. The guests were standing now. Some were filming with their phones. Others were just staring in shock. This was the scandal of the decade. This was the story they would tell for the rest of their lives. As they dragged David past me, he looked up. His eyes met mine. There was no love left in them, only pure, unadulterated hatred. "You bitch!" he spat. "You set me up!" I looked down at him. I didn't smile. I didn't frown. I just looked at him with the indifference of a stranger. "I didn't set you up, David," I said softly, only for him to hear. "I just turned on the lights." The officers shoved him forward, marching him out of the ballroom. I watched him go. I watched the man I had loved for 10 years, the man I had shared a bed with, the man I had planned a future with, being dragged away like common trash. I looked up at the balcony. Amber was being led down in handcuffs, crying hysterically. The room was buzzing now. The shock was wearing off and the gossip was beginning. People were looking at me, wondering what I would do. Would I cry? Would I faint? I did neither. I turned to the table where my champagne glass was sitting untouched. I picked it up. I walked to the front of the stage. I looked out at the crowd. "I am sorry for the interruption," I said. "Please enjoy the dessert. I hear the chocolate cake is to die for." I raised my glass in a mock toast and took a sip. Then I turned and walked off the stage, leaving the chaos behind me. I walked through the kitchen, past the stunned staff, and out the back door into the cool night air. I took a deep breath. The air tasted sweet. It tasted like freedom. It was over. The show was over. And for the first time in 10 years, I was finally the director of my own life. The doors to the ballroom burst open with a force that rattled the crystal chandeliers overhead. It was not the entrance of late guests or catering staff. It was the entrance of consequences. A dozen police officers in dark uniforms marched into the room, moving with the precision of a tactical unit. At the front of the phalanx walked Michael Ross, my lawyer, holding a thick red file folder high in the air like a weapon. He looked at me across the sea of stunned faces and gave a nearly imperceptible nod. The cavalry had arrived, and they brought the law with them. David stood frozen on the stage. The microphone dangled from his limp hand, hitting the floor with a dull thud that echoed through the silent room. He looked at the police, and then he looked at the exit signs. I could see the animal instinct firing in his brain, telling him to run, telling him to fight. But there was nowhere to run. The room was sealed. The exits were blocked by hotel security, who had been briefed by Michael hours ago. David was a rat in a cage, and the walls were made of the very people he had tried to impress. The lead detective, a tall man with a face carved from granite, marched straight up the stairs to the stage. He did not stop until he was nose to nose with my husband. The air crackled with tension. 500 people held their breath, waiting for the hammer to drop. David Jenkins, the detective, boomed, his voice projecting to the back of the room without need of amplification. "You are under arrest." David tried to step back, his hands raising in a pathetic gesture of defense. "Now hold on," he stammered, his voice cracking. "This is a misunderstanding. You do not know who I am. I am a pillar of this community. That video was a fabrication. It is a deep fake. My wife is mentally unstable." The detective did not blink. He reached for his belt and pulled out a pair of steel handcuffs. They glinted under the stage lights, cold and unforgiving. "I know exactly who you are, Mr. Jenkins," the detective said. "You are the man who purchased illegal anticoagulants from an online black market pharmacy using a burner phone 3 months ago. We have the transaction records. You are the man who forged your wife's signature on bank documents last week. We have the IP address. And you are the man who was recorded conspiring to commit murder by your mistress's mother." He spun David around with a rough shove. David slammed chest first into the podium, knocking over his glass of champagne. The liquid spilled onto the floor, mixing with the shards of glass from earlier. It looked like a crime scene. "You have the right to remain silent," the detective recited as he wrenched David's arms behind his back. "I suggest you use it." The sound of the handcuffs ratcheting shut was sharp and loud. Click, click, click. 3 clicks that signaled the end of David's life as a free man. "You are charged with attempted murder. In the first degree," the detective continued, listing the crimes like a grocery list of depravity. "Grand larceny, wire fraud, insurance fraud, and conspiracy to commit homicide." David struggled against the metal cuffs. He turned his head, looking wildly at the crowd. He locked eyes with his business partner in the front row. "Bob, do something," he screamed. "Call the mayor. Tell them who I am." Bob simply picked up his napkin and placed it over his plate, signaling that he was finished. He did not look at David. He looked at the floor. The social excommunication was instant and total. I watched it all from the side of the stage. I felt a strange sense of detachment. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't sad. I was just done. But I wasn't finished yet. There was one last loose end to tie up, one last twist of the knife that David needed to feel before they dragged him away. I walked to the center of the stage. The detective stepped back, allowing me the space. He knew this was my moment. I picked up the microphone from the floor. It was heavy in my hand. I smoothed my emerald green dress. I looked down at David. He was red-faced, sweating and breathing hard. He looked up at me with eyes full of venom. "You ruined everything," he hissed. "You ungrateful bitch." "I made you." I smiled. It was the smile of a woman who had walked through fire and come out holding a flamethrower. I leaned in close so only he and the microphone could hear. "You didn't make me." "David," I said, my voice amplified through the ballroom, "you underestimated me, and that is a very expensive mistake." I reached into my purse and pulled out a folded piece of paper. It was a copy of the operating agreement for Phoenix Asset Management, the company David had set up yesterday to hide the stolen money. "Do you remember this?" I asked, holding it up for the crowd to see. David squinted at the paper. Confusion clouded his eyes. "Yesterday you thought you were hiding $6 million in a shell company to keep it from the IRS, I said. You thought you were being clever. You signed the papers without reading the fine print because you were too busy planning my funeral." I unfolded the document. "You made yourself the manager, David," I continued, "but you made me the sole Class B member. And according to the clause you signed on page 12, the Class B member has immediate and irrevocable ownership of all assets transferred into the company." David's face went slack. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. "That means," I said, savoring every syllable, "the $6 million you stole from my trust. I took it back this morning. It is already in a new account that you cannot touch." "No," David whispered. "No, that is impossible." "And the house," I said, pointing to the screen where the photo of Amber's Victorian mansion was still frozen. "The house on Oakwood Lane. The love nest you renovated for your mistress using my money. You transferred the deed to the company yesterday, thinking you were hiding it." I leaned closer, my voice dropping to a lethal whisper. "That house belongs to me now, David. I own the roof over her head. I own the bed she sleeps in. And tomorrow morning I am serving an eviction notice. Your children and your mistress will be on the street by noon." David let out a sound that was half sob, half scream. He tried to lunge at me, but the detective held him back easily. "You cannot do that," he screamed. "They are innocent. That is my house. It was your house," I corrected. "Now it is just an asset in my portfolio, just like you were an asset in my life until you became a liability." I looked out at the crowd. "And there is one more thing," I said. I pulled out the promissory note he had signed. "You also signed a personal guarantee," I said. "You acknowledged a debt to the company of $10 million. Since I own the company, you effectively owe me $10 million. I folded the papers and put them back in my purse. "You are going to prison, David," I said. "You will probably get 20 years for attempted murder. But when you get out, you will be penniless. You will work for the rest of your life to pay me back. Every paycheck you earn, every dollar you find, it belongs to me." I stepped back. I looked him up and down, taking in the sight of him in cuffs, the ruins of a man who thought he could outsmart a woman who reads for a living. "I edited your story, David," I said, "and I didn't like the ending, so I rewrote it." I signaled to the detective. "Take him away," I said. The detective nodded. He grabbed David's arm and spun him toward the stairs. "Wait!" David screamed as he was dragged away. "Sarah, wait. I can fix this. I love you. We can make a deal." I watched him go. I watched him being hauled down the aisle past the tables of food he would never eat, past the friends he would never see again. I raised the microphone to my lips one last time. "Happy anniversary. David," I said. My voice echoed in the silence. The police dragged him through the double doors, and he was gone. I stood alone on the stage. The spotlight was hot on my face. I looked at the crowd. They were still staring at me, paralyzed by the brutality of what they had just witnessed. Then slowly, one person started to clap. It was Michael Ross, then another, then another. Soon the entire room was applauding. It wasn't a polite applause. It was a thunderous, roaring ovation. They were clapping for the performance. They were clapping for the justice. They were clapping because they were terrified of me. I lowered the microphone. I didn't bow. I didn't smile. I just walked down the stairs, my head held high, my emerald dress flowing behind me like a royal cape. I walked past the head table. I picked up my purse. I walked out of the ballroom, leaving the wreckage of my marriage behind me. I walked out into the night where the air was cool and the stars were bright. I was alone. But for the first time in my life, I wasn't lonely. I was free. The weeks following the anniversary party were a blur of flashing cameras, legal depositions, and the satisfying sound of gavels banging against mahogany desks. The media called it the Connecticut Gala scandal, but I called it the cleaning of the house. I did not hide from the press. I did not retreat into the shadows as David had expected me to. I stood front and center wearing my best suits and a calm expression, while the man who tried to murder me was paraded in front of a jury of his peers. The trial was swift. It is hard to mount a defense when your crime was broadcast in 4K resolution to 500 witnesses. The district attorney did not even need to offer a plea deal. The evidence was overwhelming. The video of the poisoning, the text messages, the forged financial documents, and the deathbed testimony of Doris Sullivan, which was played in a hushed courtroom, leaving not a single dry eye in the jury box. I sat in the front row every single day. I wanted David to see me. I wanted him to see that I was still standing, still breathing, and still holding the power he had tried so desperately to steal. When the verdict was read, David did not look at the judge. He looked at me. Guilty on all counts. The judge was a stern woman with zero tolerance for domestic abuse. She looked at David over her spectacles and delivered a sentence that echoed like a thunderclap. 25 years in a maximum security state penitentiary without the possibility of parole. David collapsed into his chair. He wept. It was not the weeping of a man who was sorry for what he had done. It was the weeping of a narcissist who could not believe the world had stopped revolving around him. As the bailiffs dragged him away, he screamed my name. He screamed that he could fix it. He screamed that he loved me. But his words were just noise, empty and meaningless, disappearing into the stale air of the courtroom. Amber did not fare much better. She tried to paint herself as a victim. She claimed David had coerced her, that she was afraid of him. But the text messages told a different story. They showed a woman who was impatient for death, a woman who demanded higher dosages and quicker results. She was convicted as an accomplice to attempted murder and conspiracy. She received 15 years. But prison was not her worst punishment. The worst punishment came from the family court. Because of her conviction and the clear evidence that she had exposed her children to a criminal conspiracy, the state intervened. I stood in the hallway of the courthouse as the social workers arrived. They were taking the twins. Amber screamed and fought as they led her away in handcuffs, but she was powerless. The court ruled that she was unfit. Since David was also incarcerated, the children were placed in the custody of David's estranged parents in rural Ohio. They were good people, simple people who had been horrified by their son's actions. They took the twins far away from the toxic luxury their parents had tried to steal. Those children would grow up safe, but they would grow up knowing their parents chose greed over love. Then came the financial reckoning. This was the part I handled personally. The morning after the verdict, I executed the eviction notice for the house on Oakwood Lane. I did not go there myself. I sent a crew. They cleared out every piece of furniture, every designer dress, every toy bought with my stolen money. The house that Amber had preened over the house she had mocked me for paying for was stripped bare. I sold it to a developer 2 days later. I did not care about the price. I just wanted it gone. I did the same with my own house, the beautiful colonial in the gated community, the place where I had been a devoted wife, the kitchen where I had been poisoned. I sold it all. I held an estate sale that was the talk of the town. People came to gawk to buy a piece of the scandal. They bought the sofas where David had lied to me. They bought the dining table where I had spilled the wine. They bought the crystal glasses and the expensive art. I watched strangers carry away the remnants of my marriage, and I felt lighter with every item that left the door. I liquidated everything: the cars, the investments, the shell company assets. I took every penny that David had tried to steal, every penny he had tried to kill for, and I put it into a new account, an account that only had my name on it. David was sitting in a 6x8 cell, wearing an orange jumpsuit and eating prison loaf. Amber was in a women's correctional facility, earning 12 cents an hour in the laundry, and I was standing in the ashes of the life they had burned down, holding a torch. They had lost everything: their freedom, their children, their reputation, their future. Justice had been served cold and absolute. 6 months later, I stood on the balcony of my new penthouse. I was no longer in Connecticut. I was in New York City. The wind whipped through my hair, carrying the sounds of the city below the sirens, the traffic, the heartbeat of millions of people living their lives. I was 40 floors up. The view was magnificent. From here, the world looked small, manageable. I walked back inside. The apartment was modern, stark, and beautiful. There were no ghosts here, no memories of betrayal, just clean lines and white walls waiting for new art. I walked to the kitchen island. A bottle of vintage Pinot Noir was breathing on the counter. I poured myself a glass. I held it up to the light, checking the color just out of habit. It was a deep, rich ruby red. I took a sip. It tasted like grapes and oak. It tasted safe. I picked up the tablet on the counter. The screen displayed the website for my new venture, the Phoenix Fund. I had used the millions I recovered from David to start a nonprofit organization. We provided legal aid, financial forensics, and emergency housing for women who were victims of financial abuse. We helped wives who had been cheated out of their savings. We helped mothers who had been coerced into signing bad contracts. We helped the silent victims, the ones who were told they were crazy, the ones who were told they were stupid. We hired Michael Ross as our lead counsel. Together, we were hunting down every husband who thought he could hide assets, every partner who thought he could use money as a weapon. I smiled. David wanted a legacy. Well, he got one. His name was now synonymous with the very thing I was fighting against. Every woman I saved, every dollar I recovered, was a direct defiance of him. I walked back out to the balcony, glass in hand. I looked at the sunset painting the skyline in shades of gold and purple. They thought I was weak. They thought I was the editor who just fixed other people's stories. They thought I would fade away quietly into the night like a good little victim. They were wrong. They thought I was a docile sheep who would just lower her head and graze while the wolves circled. But they forgot the most important rule of nature. Even the gentlest sheep, when cornered, when threatened, when pushed to the absolute brink, will grow the fangs of a wolf. I took another sip of wine. Do not ever underestimate a quiet woman. We listen. We observe. And when we strike, we do not miss. Do not let your kindness become a weapon for others to use against you. Guard your heart, but guard your assets too. If you enjoyed watching this house of cards fall, if you felt the satisfaction of seeing justice served, then let me know. Leave a comment with the word karma below. Share this story with someone who needs to hear it. You never know who might be waking up to their own truth today. I am Sarah Jenkins, and this is my new beginning. See you next time.